All right. I think, let's see, we got 1, 2, 3, 4. We got 4 of us. We can rock and roll here, right, Jacqueline?
We're all set to go and we have 5.
We have 5, maybe even 6. Okay. 5. Good evening, everyone. This is a regular meeting of the Programs and Services Committee. It is Wednesday, June 21st. We're being audio and video recorded. Present at the beginning of the meeting, members of the committee from Ward 1, Councilor Maria Greenberg. Ward 2, President Albright. I'm Josh Krinsman, Chair of the committee. Councilor at Large from Ward 4. From Ward 5, Councilor Bill Humphrey. And from Ward 8, Councilor Holly Ryan. I know that our Vice Chair, Councilor Brenda Noel, will be joining later. I think she's at another committee hearing on a couple of items that she's very interested in. And I don't think Councilor Baker is joining us tonight. So this may be who we have at least to get started. First item on our agenda. Let me also point out that from the city, we've been joined by Mr. Andrew Lee from the Law Department. First item on our agenda is item 209-23. This is the appointment of James Thompson to the Biosafety Committee. Do you go by Jed?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. I deduced that from the Zoom name because I am very quick like that. So, Mr. Thompson, what we normally do is I give you an opportunity to tell us why you're interested in serving in this capacity. We'll then open it up to councilors to see if they have any questions about you. After that, we'll proceed to a vote of the committee, and I'll let you know where we go from there. So let me just, again, start by offering you an opportunity to tell us why it is that you're interested in serving on the Biosafety Committee.
Yeah, thank you. So I was alerted to the opportunity by Jay Schwartz, who has served on the committee for some time. Jay and I are members of the same temple here in Temple Shalom, West Newton. It's exciting to me to, as someone who's had a 25-year career now in biotech and pharma and drug discovery, to potentially be able to help build that ecosystem in Newton. I think that, having worked in laboratories of various biosafety levels myself, I would be able to assess those proposals. And if you agree, I'm glad to serve in that capacity.
Great, thank you very much. I don't think I mentioned it, but obviously we have all seen your resume. Your materials are attached to our agenda for the evening. Probably seen those as well. Let me see what questions or comments we have from councilors. And before I call on President Albright, I will just note that we've been joined by Councilor Pam Wright, who is a member of the committee from Ward 3. President Albright.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Thompson, first, thank you very much for being willing to serve. But I have a question for you about life sciences in Newton. Recently Alexandria was going to had bought a building and they were going to make it into life sciences. They were going to participate with the Riverside project and do a life sciences building, and they have pulled out and pulled back. So what does that mean for Newton and life sciences? Is it Alexandria or is it Newton?
Yeah, I have no relationship to Alexandria, although I did work in one of their buildings when I was employed by Novartis in Kendall Square. Hazarding a guess, there's been a large buildup of life sciences space, I think, in response possibly to the decreased interest in traditional office space in the area, perhaps. But last year was not a great year for biotech in terms of investment and buildup. And again, just trying to be super clear, I have absolutely I'm purely making an educated guess here, but my guess is that maybe they felt that there was some overbuilding going on, and that might have prompted them to pull back. Just a guess.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the guess.
Thank you. So it sounds like you're speaking officially on behalf of Alexandria Real Estate.
Oh, absolutely not. In no way.
Thank you. Appreciate it. President Albright, you're all set?
Yep.
Okay, great. Councilor Ryan?
Yeah, thank you. a little bit on the lines of what President Albright said. I just wondering, I mean, I'm one that wanted to get biotech here, and I know how much it's in the surrounding cities, and especially Cambridge and Boston. But now other towns have been a courtship with this industry. I'm just and I think we need it, and it'd be great for our commercial base. And yes, but I want to ask you, since it's the biosafety committee, which is great. For the question I'm going to ask is that as a resident of Newton and somebody in the field, because we've had questions about the safety of these facilities. From what I've looked into, I don't see much of a problem there or any problem, but I like, as you're a resident and in the field, could you comment on that?
Yeah, I think, you know, I've spent years in biosafety level 2 labs. And as I understand, those are, you know, some of the things that come up before the biosafety committee. You know, in my estimation, those laboratories are, you know, not just safe to live by, but they're completely safe to work in. You know, I had a friend who was an artist who said that one of the most dangerous professions that you could be involved in was art, because they use chemicals and no one regulates how they use them. And, you know, I've always been a chemist and a biochemist working in laboratories, and I think, you know, the kinds of regulatory frameworks that are there to take care of people who work there are, you know, make those labs in some ways safer than our homes. And you know, if someone, well, I don't think our neighborhood is zoned for commercial development, but if someone built a lab next door to my house, I'd be fine staying in my house.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Thompson.
All right, I do not see any other hands up, but I thought I heard Councilor Wright unmuting so that she could make a motion.
Motion to approve.
Ah, I did. Okay, Councilor Wright has moved approval of 20923, the appointment of James Thompson to Biosafety Committee. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, Mr. Thompson, what that means is this goes to the full city council, which is in, is it in 2 weeks? I guess it's
4 weeks or 3.
4 weeks.
July.
Okay.
July 10th.
July 10th, thank you. You don't have to be present for that, and you don't even have to stay on the rest of our meeting. We're not offended if you close up shop and, you know, go be with other people. That's fine. You're welcome to stay as long as you want, but this committee has approved it, and it will go to the full council now.
All right. Well, thank you, Josh. I think I will excuse myself, and I wish you all the best, and thank you for your questions and your attention.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
All right, you too.
All right, the next item we have is item 145-23, requesting a home rule petition. And if I'm not mistaken, this is the request for a home rule petition and approval for the extension of the lease to extend the ground lease for NCDF at Warren House. So, Mr. Lee, are you going to tell us about this and why it's needed?
I'm going to kick this one off, Chair Krinsman.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Mr. Heath, go ahead.
Good evening.
Good evening.
The docket item request would authorize the city to both initiate a home rule petition to allow the city to extend their current 65-year ground lease with Newton Community Development Foundation for the former Warren Junior High School to 99 years, and at the same time authorize the city to enter into that extension. The administration is extremely supportive of this request. NCDF is a valued and important community partner, offering both affordable housing and services to low and moderate income families, older adults, and individuals with disabilities. Warren House currently consists of 59 units of housing, 21 of which are affordable to households at 50% AMI. As part of the lease extension request, NCDF would extend affordability to an additional 4 more units at the 80% AMI level, bringing the total number of affordable units to 25 or 42% of the total units. NCDF Executive Director Gene Strickland is here this evening, along with Deputy Solicitor Andrew Lee and myself, to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Mr. Heath. I wasn't 100% clear from the materials, and I apologize. This is probably just me not understanding. But why is the home rule legislation necessary? Is it the duration of the lease?
It's for the duration of, it's actually for two purposes. The home rule petition is asking for two things. The first is the current term of the lease is 65 years. That is the ceiling limit that the city can lease real property for, pursuant to prior home rule special legislation that we received. So because of that, in order to extend it to 99 years, we need the legislature to authorize that. The second reason, and I believe it's in the materials as well in the draft home rule petition, we're explicitly asking the special legislation to waive the requirements of Chapter 30B, the procurement law, because even though it's an extension, even though it is currently leased and it doesn't expire until 2056, under 30B, because we're extending it, we have to go through procurement, which obviously doesn't make sense. So we just need the legislature's blessing to not go through that process.
Gotcha. That makes sense. I appreciate that. Committee, any questions, concerns, motions, desires, thoughts? Councilor Wright.
I was wondering, why are they doing the extension of the lease right now if it doesn't expire until what, 2057?
Mr. Heath?
I think I'm going to pass that one to Ms. Strickland to respond.
Sure.
Ms.
Good
Strickland?
evening. Good evening. Thanks for meeting with us here this evening. The reason, Councilor Wright, is because we are doing a refinance of the property. Our first mortgage will be paid in December, and we have a second mortgage with a balloon payment that's due little over $3 million in December as well. And in order to refinance, the ground lease needs to extend at least 10 years beyond the refinancing period. So hence.
Okay, thank you. That makes sense.
You're welcome. Also wanted to add a little bit too. We did a similar process back in 2016 for Weeks School Limited Partnership when we extended that lease through a home rule petition as well, and also waived the procurement process at that time.
Gotcha. The waiver of 30B.
Correct.
Gotcha. Okay. President Albright, followed by Councilor Ryan. President Albright.
Thank you. I didn't understand this sentence in the memo. The parties also agreed to a provision to defer payment on the annual rent if 50% of the property cash flow in the given year was less than the annual $75,000 payment, and any deferred rent would accrue at 8% of simple interest. I don't understand who's paying. Are you paying rent to the city?
The original term.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Andrew. I'm sorry.
So that's a term in the original lease as it currently exists today, President Albright. And the way that it was structured was there was a principal amount of $1.5 million due to the city under the lease. That was to be paid at a rate of $75,000 per year. However, the provision that you just read was a caveat to that $75,000 per year. Basically, if the cash flow didn't allow for that rental payment, and I can discuss the actual calculation for the cash flow offline. It is incredibly complicated, but the gist of it is if the cash flow wouldn't allow for that payment, then they can defer any amount that they haven't paid in perpetuity, however, at the interest rate of 8%.
Oh, they're deferring payment at 8% interest in perpetuity?
Well, I guess perpetuity is the wrong word for the term of the lease.
Okay. So are they paying us rent for the property?
So they had made, I think it's fair to say, minimal payments for the actual rent itself under the lease. And that is kind of, if you'd like, I can get into the arrangement that that NCDF has agreed to in principle with regards to the actual extension itself. As it pertains to the financial terms. Would you kind of like me to explain that piece?
Well, is this also going to finance? I suppose that's more in their territory. I'd love to understand it, but if it's going to finance, I don't need to, I guess.
So this is not going to finance, and I can explain the reasoning why, which is the original board order for the reuse of this property from 1989 explicitly stated that the minimum price, and this is what was set by the city council, would be $1 million. And the actual, if you recall, the actual way this deal was structured was that the building itself was sold to NCDF. The memo said 600,000, but I looked to double check. It actually was sold for an amount of $500,000, which the city received, and then it was at 1.5 million under the lease. So the way that it's being arranged now is the city is getting that whole $1.5 million in principle, contingent on the actual refinancing, of course. And then we would get additional payments for the additional extension term. So because of that, it's well beyond the minimum set by the city council. So we're well within that realm. And that's why it's pretty much only in PNS, because the main thing that we need from the city council is authorization to extend the term.
I see. Okay, well, that helps a little bit.
Enough that you're all set, President Albright?
Yeah.
Okay. Councilor Ryan.
I'll be brief. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director Heath, I just want to make sure I heard you right, that there's going to be extra affordable units at 80% AMI?
Yeah, so right now there are 21, and Ms. Strickland can correct me if I'm wrong here. There are 21 units that are at 50% AMI and below. There's a little bit of a nuance with those 21. There are 6 that are set to expire, I think, at the end of this year. They're going to extend in perpetuity those. But in addition, they're going to add 4 more units at the 80% AMI level to provide additional affordability.
All right, who decides that it's 80%? Why wouldn't we keep it at 50 or below like the rest of them?
So these are 4 new units that would have affordability restrictions that previously didn't have any affordability restrictions. That's kind of a bonus, if you will, as part of this. Jean is probably better able to address the issue of the AMI.
Right. I mean, Ms. Strickland, you, I don't know how much you've heard me, but I don't consider 80% AMI affordable. So,
Understood.
Mr. Heath's heard me.
Understood.
Yeah.
And we certainly concur there in terms of maintaining, as Mr. Heath had noted earlier, 21 of the units are at 50% AMI right now. 6 of those units are about to expire. So we will maintain the affordability of those 6 units at 50%. In order to make this work, those 4 units that we're putting on at 80% of AMI are currently market rate units. And
Okay.
in order to make the refinance work,
All right, that's what I'm trying to get at. Is it got
at
something to do
80%.
with the refinance or financing?
Exactly.
All right, but I still say it's not affordable.
If we could, we would. The majority of our portfolio is at 50% of AMI throughout.
All right, that's great. I thought it was pretty
Yep.
low. And that's really good. So thank you for answering that question. I'm all done. Thanks.
All right. President Albright?
Sorry to be back again, but I just want to reference that we're waiving 1.4 million of interest owed. And then you agreed to, Ms. Strickland, you agreed to pay $1 million over 26 years, $38,000 a year. And what I really wanted to read that, the purpose of that was that folks there are so many people in Newton who say, let's just have more affordable housing. It's just really easy. Let's just get affordable housing. It's really hard to do affordable housing. And this is the way actually that most affordable housing is able to, are you using the money not to refinance, to redo the units?
we're using the money to refinance. Primarily, the majority of it will be used to put new windows in at the,
Okay,
and also to extend affordability of those 6 units and
Yep.
other work, interior work, but not a lot of.
right.
And
Well,
we do have a 20-year capital needs study as well that will enable us to address those needs.
okay, well, that's good. It's just really hard to do affordable housing. It's just, you don't have enough money from the rent to do what needs to be done, and refinancing is what allows people to keep the thing going at all. You know, we had a suggestion from a citizen who said, oh, I want to do more affordable housing. Well, we'll just tell people to do it. It isn't that easy. It just isn't that easy. And this shows that it isn't that easy. So I'm happy with the deal, but I wish that more people understood how hard it is to do this kind of work. Thank you.
And again, that 1 point, just to elaborate a little bit further on that 1.5, the initial lease amount, that was based on cash flow, and there just has not been adequate cash flow to make those payments.
That's
And
I totally
the
understand.
refinance will enable us to make that payment. And then we, just to clarify a little bit further why the 1 million is being pushed out as far as it is. And that is because we will have satisfied this next mortgage, and we can put that into the mortgage that will be negotiated in another 35, 40 years.
And what I plan to do is make a clip out of this piece of the Programs and Services Committee and send it to that person who says, just tell them to go affordable housing. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you, Counselor, or Madam President.
All right. Thank you, Madam President. Councilor Ryan, is that a remnant, or are you looking to comment again? Fair enough, understood. Seeing no more comments, do I have any motions from?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm in the car and it's pretty bright, so it's hard for me to see my screen. Is this a really bad time though to get a mortgage with the rates so high, or do you have a way to get a reasonable rate for a mortgage? Because this should affect a lot of your cash flow.
We're working, we've already got commitment letters from Massachusetts Housing Investment Corp. And from Mass Housing. And as you know, it is not a great time, but our current interest rate is 7% on the first mortgage, 3.5% on the second mortgage. So we're hoping that we can continue to get some competitive rates. We had based our one-stop application on an interest rate of 6.8%. So there's really no choice, Councilor Wright, because that balloon payment is due.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I also, somebody had mentioned whether or not the potential for a tour at the property. And I will be meeting on Friday morning at 9:15 with a few members of the Affordable Housing Trust and CPC who were unable to attend a tour we had a couple of weeks ago. So if anybody's interested in joining us, I'd encourage you to meet at the front door of Warren House, which faces the back of the property facing the fields. If you'd like to join us for that tour.
When is that?
This Friday morning at 9:15.
Thank you. I see Councilors Greenberg and President Albright again. So Councilor Greenberg.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the invitation, Ms. Strickland. Unfortunately, I won't be able to go because of work, but I'd love to come see the apartments at some point. But I'd like to move approval when you're ready, Chair.
Fair enough. Councilor Greenberg has moved approval. Any discussion on the motion? Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, Jackman, what are we, 6?
Yes.
6, okay, 6-0. Thank you. Mr. Lee, so that we have the language, it's all set. Council will approve it, Mayor will sign it, and that'll get shipped off to the legislature. for submission as a home rule. Is that right?
Correct, Council Klinsman.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Heath. Thank you, Ms. Strickland.
Thank you all.
Appreciate it. We are now on to some election matters. So we're going to do the next two items together. Okay, I'll read them both. Item 231-23, this is a request to set early voting hours for the September 12th preliminary election, if needed. And item 232-23, a request to set the early voting hours for the November 7th municipal election. We'll do them both together because the analysis of when you set the voting hours, when the early voting hours are, is basically parallel. It's similar. You set the specific hours for the specific election under state law. We have to do that. We have to do that for each election. I think Mr. Doyle will probably explain to us, but the reason we don't yet know if there's a preliminary, as those of you who have run for office here know, is because there is only a preliminary election in the city of Newton if more than 2 times the number of candidates for an available seat are running. Otherwise, everyone makes it to the general. So with that in mind, again, both our job tonight is to set the early voting hours for the preliminary if it's necessary, and definitely for the November 7th election. So let me turn it over to Mr. Doyle, because I believe they met with the Election Commission today. I don't know if this vote took place today, but I know there was a meeting today. And one of the items that the Election Commission weighs in on is the early voting hours. So all that is to say, Mr. Doyle, please enlighten us.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the rest of the committee. Jack, I'm going to share my screen if that's all right. Just I have a little quick PowerPoint to show.
It has been enabled for you.
Okay.
I'm told it has been enabled for you. So
yes, there it is. All right. So yeah, just to kind of touch on what you said, Chairman, so a preliminary is triggered if there's 3 or more candidates running at any of the school committee spots or any of the ward councilor spots. For the councilor at large, I'm still getting a grasp of it. A councilor at large preliminary is triggered if it's 5 or more candidates running for the seat. Currently, we would, of course, we don't know until they return the papers. We have to certify them, but assuming that they do get returned certified, we'd have right now, we have 3 running for Ward 7 school committee and 3 running for Ward 6 ward councilor. So, but let me hop into.
I think there's 3 running for Ward 2 now too.
Oh, so today actually, Peter Bruce dropped out of the race officially.
Oh, he did.
So
okay.
It's just 2 for Ward 2 again.
Mr. Doyle, I think you might be showing the wrong PowerPoint.
No, this is the.
This is for the polling change, but we're still on the early voting hours.
Oh, can you not? Oh,
we're seeing construction happening at Albemarle.
Oh. It's bizarre. Let me stop that share for some reason. It's not. All right.
While you're pulling that up, though, what I'm hearing, Mr. Doyle, is that there will likely be a preliminary for at least 2 ward races, but we don't yet know if there will be a citywide preliminary required.
Just right now, there's going to be a preliminary for Ward 6 as it stands.
Okay.
Ward councilor, and then we'll see what happens with the school committee. I mean, yes, as of now, there would be, but until we get them back and certified. Sure.
Of course.
So yeah, so the September preliminary, if necessary, we'll do early voting. The days that
are you able to go into like slideshow view or perfect, excellent, thank you.
Yep. So the days that we have proposed for September is Tuesday, September 5th, 8:30 to 5, and Wednesday, September 6th, 9 o'clock in the morning to 8 at night. So the reason we're doing 2 days here is because historically city preliminaries, when it's not mayoral, is around 10%. 2019, it was, I think, around 15-17%, so a little bit higher, but that's still, compared to the other election turnouts, relatively low. So we feel 2 days here is appropriate. Since we're not using a weekend, one of the days will be until 8 o'clock to give the typical 9 to 5ers who work in the office a chance to vote after, between 5 o'clock and 8 o'clock if they couldn't do it during business hours. Though we're not doing a weekend because the weekend before is Labor Day, so there won't be a lot of people around, kind of the end of summer traditionally. And then the weekend after we would be violating state law by doing it because it would be too close to Election Day. And for November, it's worth mentioning that September was, those dates were recommended by the Election Commission unanimously, as are the November dates. So the reason that these are recommended is because this is the very similar model we followed for the March election, which is going to have about a similar turnout. So we figured to stick with the same model. So Saturday, October 28th and Sunday, October 29th, both 11 to 5 o'clock, keep the same hours, both weekend days, limits confusion. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday is, Monday, the October 30th, 8:30 to 5, Wednesday, November 1st, 8:30 to 5, and then Tuesday, October 31st is a little bit different, 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. Again, just picking one of the weekday days and extending it to 8 o'clock to make sure that people who go in the office from 9 to 5 have a chance to vote. So that was our thought process there, kind of keep the same model, but make one of the days until 8 o'clock to allow for more people to vote. And again, this is also approved by the Election Commission unanimously. And then here's just a election calendar I included. I can go back to either of them if any would like. But those are the 2 September and November early voting hours, and I'm happy to field any questions.
Yeah, just, hold on to those calendars because it helps to articulate or demonstrate the window, because I know there's a certain window that the early voting days have to fall within. So I think it's helpful for that purpose. Let's see what questions we got. Councilor Wright?
Thank you, Chair Grinsman. I think the late date should not be on the 31st because that's Halloween. So it should be one of the other 2 days and probably the 1st, because people might be taking their kids out for trick-or-treating, or they might be staying home handing out candy. So I think it should be a different day for the late hours.
Yep. So the reason we can't do it, we could certainly do it Monday. The reason we're not doing Wednesday is because as soon as 5 o'clock ends or as soon as early voting ends on that Wednesday, the 1st of November, I start running the check-in books, and we kind of enter the next phase of pre-election prep. So Monday, if we were to change that day, Monday could be a good day. That would be, I don't really see an issue putting it on Monday, just one of the weekday days.
So maybe you could pull up the hours that the Election Commission approved again, Mr. Doyle, because I think it's 5 days.
For November?
For November, yeah.
Yep.
Because I think that's the one that Councilor Wright is concerned with. She's concerned that Tuesday, October 31st is Halloween, and that's the one day for the extended hours. Is that right,
Yes.
Councilor Wright?
Yes, that is.
Okay.
I would be fine with Monday, if he doesn't want to do Wednesday, but I don't think Tuesday's I don't think the 31st is a good day for late hours.
I mean, we're going to lose all those kids who are going to be trick-or-treating. Those 12-year-olds won't be voting. I'm just kidding, sorry. Let's hear from other committee members. So, I mean, it sounds like what you want to do is switch and have the Monday be the till 8 p.m. Or maybe you would switch what the Tuesday hours show and the Monday hours show. Just reverse them.
Just reverse them. Yeah, that's fine.
9 to 8 and 8:30 to 5. What I don't know, Mr. Doyle, maybe you can help with this. Would this need to go back to the Election Commission if there's disagreement on the hours?
I am actually not sure. I would have to check with, I can definitely look into that. I can check as soon as tomorrow morning. Okay. This is just based on what I know so far in the position. That was a recommendation, not a you have to. It's just a recommendation. That's what they are recommending to the committee, and then the committee can, judge that as they will. I personally think that that day was not arbitrary per se, but we needed a weekday that wasn't Wednesday, so either Monday or Tuesday. I personally don't see an issue with making it Monday.
And I should have looked into this beforehand, but my recollection is that I think the election commission makes a recommendation and the city council legally sets the hours. But we can double check on that if there's disagreement here. So
I do believe that's the case.
Okay. President Albright?
I was just saying that I that is the case. We have the final say to set the hours.
Okay. President Albright, while you have the floor, do you want to weigh in on Councilor Wright's suggestion? Are you on board with switching the Monday and Tuesday hours?
I am fine with switching the Monday and Tuesday.
Okay. Does anyone on the committee disagree with switching the hours? If you hate Halloween on the committee, just let me know. Who are the haters out there who disagree with switching these hours? Okay, I'm seeing no hands. So what I'm taking this to mean, I have to interpret the silence in many different ways, but I've gotten very good at it. So what I think I just heard was that Councilor Wright made a motion to approve the September early voting hours if necessary, and she also made a motion to approve the October early voting hours, but to switch the Monday and Tuesday times. So that Monday, October 30th would be 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. and Tuesday, October 31st would be 8:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. Did I hear that right, Councilor Wright?
Yes.
Perfect, okay. So we have two motions on the floor. First, let's go to the September hours. Any discussion on that motion for the 2 early voting days, if necessary? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. Any abstentions? Okay, so we're good on that one. The motion for October, again, is to approve what we see here on the screen, but to switch the hours from Monday and Tuesday, just reverse them for those 2 days. Any discussion on that motion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. Thank you. So that takes care, excuse me, that takes care of the 2 early voting items. Mr. Doyle, don't nobody go nowhere, because the next item is item 233-23. This is a request to move the Ward 1 Precinct 4 polling location. This is the location currently at the Pellegrini Playground. And Mr. Doyle, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. So the Election Commission met today on this matter. The proposal from the clerk's office was to move Ward 1 Precinct 4, which is currently at Pellegrini, over to Lincoln Elliott School on 191 Pearl Street that currently has Ward 1 Precinct 1. However, during the time when we had suggested that to today's meeting, we did get some updated information that I provided to the Election Commission. The updated information is as follows. I guess some background. The reason we were moving is because a few months ago we got information that Pellegrini was going to be under construction, allowing us to not use it as a polling location. However, like I said, just recently we got updated information from Joshua Morse with the building department, and the updated information is as follows. The work done at Pellegrini will be strictly exterior work. It will not include any interior work. Utilities such as water and power will still be available throughout the duration of the work. Work is masonry and roof replacement. However, like I said, completely exterior. The work will not impact the parking lot, nor will it impact parking capacity. On election days, the work will not even be happening. And Josh Morris was adamant that this work would not impact voting. The way that it was made to sound to me was that voters will not even know that this work is going on. So with this new information provided to the Election Commission, they recommended unanimously to not recommend to the committee that Pellegrini be switched, aka that they recommended to keep 1-4 at Pellegrini. So with that information being provided to the committee, I am happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. So it sounds like the recommendation is to NA on the item. So with that recommendation in mind, do I have a motion from any of my? Councilor Humphrey has moved to NAN, item 233-23. President Albright?
Oh, no, I'm fine.
Okay. All those in favor of NAN, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. Next item is 234-23, a request to move Ward 2 Precinct 1 polling location. This is the location currently at the Albemarle Fieldhouse. Mr. Doyle.
You. So only one more item for me. So this is, let me share my screen. So this is the proposal to move polling location Ward 2 Precinct 1 Albemarle Fieldhouse to the Scandinavian Living Center at 206 Waltham Street. Worth noting, so we are proposing to move it because of construction happening throughout September, possibly. I'll get to that, why it's possible, shortly. The Election Commission, it's worth mentioning, did vote for nothing to recommend this change. Not at today's meeting, but at the meeting previous last Thursday, June 15th. So as far as location goes, it was, we thought it was a very good solution because the location, it's about a 2-minute drive, about 0.5 miles from Albemarle to Scandinavian. So max, someone is going to be traveling 2 minutes more, half a mile more additional. And that's at most, it could be closer for some. And if we have people that are walking, it will be an additional about 10 to 15 minute walk. It's also about a half mile, maybe even 0.4. So the reason I say it's possible construction is because according to the planning department, construction is slated to begin on the Gath Pools, which is just right next door. They essentially share a parking lot. And it has not gone out to bid yet. And when it does go out to bid, it's slated to start and end in August. However, we did hear from Joshua Ostroff at the planning department that there is a potential for delays, as there always is with construction projects. Any delays mean could be pushed into September. Some of this work will include temporary road closure. As you can see by this diagram sent to us by the planning department, there is a decent amount of parking. So the parking lot at Albemarle Fieldhouse is really just a row of straight parking just like this all along the road. And as you can see, there will be a fair amount of obstruction to parking during this construction. For that reason, they did say it could be a potential conflict if the project is to be delayed. So that is why we are proposing that we just change this for September and November of this year. So not a permanent change, just temporary, just to avoid any conflicts or any interruptions or limits in parking. So again, it would just be for September and November. We would alert the voters with with postcards. We put signs at Albemarle, and as in March of 24 for the presidential, it will go back to the way that it was.
And can I just ask Mr. Doyle, if hypothetically the construction were to take place and be completed in August, so that it is actually done and dusted, what would then happen for September and October? Are you still recommending the change, or would we revert?
We are still recommending the change because we would, before August, we would, as soon as we get the okay and if we were to get an all approval from full council, we would have to send out the postcards immediately. So it wouldn't leave us in a situation where it doesn't allow us to play it by ear at all. We'd either have to or not decide. Yeah,
my first question should have been, and what I was really trying to get at is what's sort of the go, no go date, the date by which you have to have made this decision or relocated.
Yeah, there isn't a hard and fast date, although our priority is making sure that we give the residents more than enough heads up. So I think anything if we get within a month of the election, that would be very close. I'd like to keep it a month and a half plus out. But that's, again, I know there's a protocol, so I'm definitely aware of that too.
Understood. Councilor Wright.
Thank you. If we do make the change, Peter Harrington sent us an email, and I vote at the Scandinavian House. it's a tricky area to get on and off the street. And I don't know if we're gonna have two precincts there, if we should have, especially at night in September when it's dark, having a police detail to help with the traffic coming in and out of there.
Okay, yeah, that's something, so I can check with two different departments. I can check with our traffic department to see exactly how the flow will be impacted. I have been to that area. I know there's a light up there, so definitely. And I can also check with the police department to see if it's possible to get a police detail.
So the light does not help really the people getting out of that driveway. It just, because it's generally infrequent, no one's expecting anyone to come out of that driveway, and there's not a light right there. So it is somewhat confusing.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to check with I can definitely check with the traffic council to see what would happen with that. But yes, thank you.
But it sounds like though the pool construction is just for 1 month, and we just don't know when it's going to happen. It's scheduled for August, but might get delayed. So it may not even be happening in November. Is that correct?
Correct. It more than likely will not be happening in November, but the reason that we would have to keep it for September and November is it would be, we are weary of, we don't want to confuse any of the residents. We wouldn't have enough time between September and November when we send them. We feel that it would be smoother for the residents to just keep it for 2 elections within 2 months of each other, then go back instead of changing it.
So, well, getting back to Chair Krinsman's comment about when's your last drop dead date when you need to send out the postcard. So you're saying a month before, and what is it, September 4th or whatever, so that'll be by August 4th. I would think Mr. Morris would know if we're going in at that point in August or if it's getting delayed.
Well, the delays come from, a lot of the delays happen due to weather. So we could have a stretch in August where there's a lot of rain and it's delayed. So we may not know.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not seeing any other hands at the moment. Oh, Mr. Demarisi, were you looking to weigh in on this?
Yes, thank you, Chairman Kritzman and everyone. Just wanted to chime in on the gap pool project schedule. So I think Mr. Doyle was talking about the traffic calming project in August. And yes, we are putting out the gap pool project to start hopefully in September, and construction for that project will last throughout May. So that area will be impacted by construction for a while. And that's all. I just wanted to clarify.
Thank you for weighing in with that, because I had seen a couple of emails to that effect and I forgot about that. So, I mean, what you're saying is that we are far more certain that there will be construction occurring during that time, and it will interfere with the location. And we are more certain that we need, or we should relocate this polling precinct to avoid that confusion. Right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Wright, did you hear that? Does that make more sense to you?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. President Albright. President Albright, you're muted.
Sorry. So it's a temporary move for just this year, and I would like to move approval.
All right, President Albright has moved approval. Any other discussion on that motion? All right, then all those in favor, this is the relocation of the Ward 2 Precinct 1 polling location from 250 Albemarle Road to 206 Waltham to the Scandinavian Living Center. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Doyle.
Thank you, committee. I appreciate it.
Our next item is item 7423, requesting a home rule petition. This is one on the subject of anticoagulant rodenticides. I'm very sorry, I did not have the privilege of being with you all when you discussed this last time, but I know Councilor Norton has joined us. She is busy running between like 17 different committee meetings tonight. I think 5 different municipalities, 42 different items that she's filed. She files things in Arlington. I think she has an item tonight in Springfield. I'm not sure, but Councilor Norton, why don't you tell us what you got?
Yeah, thank you so much. I don't want to repeat because we've now sat through a full presentation on this, and I don't know if Ms. Kiesel is here. I'm on my phone in the vineyard, sorry. And, but as folks may recall from last time, this really is about, we've already voted to limit the application of this type of rodenticide that gets eaten secondhand by hawks and owls and non-target species, and it kills them. And so we already passed an item where we're not allowing the application by the city or city contractors. What this item would do would put forward or ask our state delegation to put forward a home rule petition so that we could limit the application of anyone in the city of these type of rodenticides. So we had a long presentation at the last one. So I don't know if people need to or want to go into the detail of why these are bad or look at the horrible photos again of some of the recent victims, but that's what this item is about.
Thank you. And again, I wasn't here, so I apologize, but I thought the committee wanted to see the language of the home rule. And if I'm not mistaken, we now have that. President Albright?
I was looking for the language for the home rule petition, and I'm sorry to say that I missed it. Is it there?
Yeah, it's in the packet. It wasn't originally, but then
page 19 of 22
added it. And the committee did express support for moving ahead with putting this language together when you did take this item up before.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Humphrey. I did see it before.
It's short. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So I'm fine with it, and I'll move approval when the time comes.
Okay. Well, if you're not, the time is now. We get to discuss that. President Albright has moved approval. Councillor Wright.
Is this just to use or also for sale?
I think if I remember correctly, the sale is already highly regulated. So I think only commercial
okay.
applications.
The language of the home rule petition, Councilor Wright, the language of the home rule petition, if the legislature passes the law, it would allow the city of Newton to pass an ordinance prohibiting the application of anticoagulant rodenticides.
Okay, I didn't know if the hardware store had to pull it off the shelf or something like that.
No, you can't buy this stuff off the shelf anymore due to previous poisonings of children and so forth.
Okay.
So they did tighten up the use, but they didn't limit the use.
Yeah, you can't buy this stuff anymore. Believe me, Councilor Norton has tried.
Thank you. I'm done.
Great. President Albright has moved approval. Any other any other discussion on that motion? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, I believe that is 6 to 0. Thank you, Councilor Norton.
Thanks, all. Back to my other items.
Okay, and yes, back to the other items. I think we're getting into the Parks and Rec portion of the festivities tonight. So the next item, actually, we're going to skip over this item because I know Councilor Noel wanted to be here for the marathon item. So we're going to skip over that in the hopes that we can do it later in the meeting when Councilor Noel is back. So Jacqueline, if I forget to come back to that, remind me. So the next item would be item 370-22. This is the discussion on the field maintenance plan. I'm going to excuse me, I'm going to introduce the next couple of items because I think Parks and Rec and Culture is going to take them all together. But next item is 63-23, request for a discussion with city staff regarding a cost-benefit analysis of grass fields. And lastly, 453-22, the discussion and creation of a strategic and operational plan for capital improvements. Lewis, I see you here. Commissioner Banks, I apologize for my view, but I think I saw you here earlier.
Yes.
You're here.
Hello.
Welcome. Great. Hello.
I'm so glad Luis was able to speak up on Albemarle. I just caught the end of that discussion. So sounds like you were helpful, Luis. Thank you.
Absolutely. And mostly because I forgot what's happening on the planet. So I apologize. Commissioner Banks, is it you? Someone else?
I would love to open this up for us. So thank you. Good evening,
Sure.
everyone. So tonight, we know that President Albright has been working closely with several of our other city council members to put together the docket item. Luis, if you could just go to the next slide. I did try to put each of the docket items for this evening into the presentation. What we're going to be discussing is giving a better understanding of the city's strategy in meeting the needs of our sport groups, including the schools. And we do have a lot of institutional knowledge within our department that we rely on, and it has been very helpful for us to dig into the data and capture some of the direct and indirect costs. Our maintenance division coworkers, who unfortunately are not with us here this evening, who tend to our grass and our turf fields, are as busy as ever. We have continued to expand our irrigation to improve our grass field conditions over the past years. And despite our staffing levels in the department declining, we are up to almost 52 irrigation systems with over 600 valves and 2,700 irrigation heads. So almost half of these systems get their water from wells, and we have a total of 25 wells. That makes for over 3,000 components that could have a critical failure at any time. And I mention this because water is so important for our athletic fields. There is so much irrigation work in the city that we are actually still, as it's almost July right now, working to turn on our irrigation systems. And we do, of course, prioritize what we consider our premier playing fields, which you'll see described throughout the presentation tonight. There's quite a bit of information that we're going to present this evening. And as you know, we have been working on getting our pool project ready to bid. We have been getting our athletic field projects fully designed, and we're getting our summer projects under construction, which is very exciting. I definitely would have preferred to have shared these slides beforehand, but we will make sure to get them over to Jacqueline. So each of you will have a copy of all of the information that's in here tonight. We welcome the discussion on our athletic playing fields and think it's an important topic. And we will be back before you soon, probably within the next 6 months, to discuss and request funding for resurfacing the field and track at the Newton North High School. That would be a project that we would look to do the construction next summer. And we also have had sport groups approach us who have expressed interest in a public-private partnership where they would donate toward an additional turf field and be able to expand availability for their practices and games. So we expect to continue this conversation into the future. We do have 3 separate docket items tonight, which, as I mentioned, I'll have outlined and segregated here in the presentation. We are able to pause between each docket if that's how you would like to stop and have a discussion between each of those. We can do that. And I just want to take a minute to recognize a few people here at the meeting tonight. Luis and I will be taking you through the presentation. Hello, Luis. We also have Sheila Butts joining us. She has been doing our field scheduling and can assist with questions on field availability and schedules. And Pat Gonzalez is here from the Newton School Department. She is the athletic director at Newton South High School. And we have 2 members of our consultant team, Michael Dodson and Heather Lanza, are joining us from CDM Smith this evening. I hope I haven't missed anybody. I'm just trying to take a quick peek here, but I think that is everyone. So if you need any of us for questions, we will all be available. With that, I will turn it over to you, Luis, to start our presentation.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Chair Krinsman and committee as well for having us tonight. We'll try to run through these items and all this info as succinctly as possible, but obviously feel free to chime in with any questions as they come up, or however you would like to handle that. So to start us off, you know, a lot of questions that we get are, why are synthetic turf fields so prevalent, and why do we need them in Newton? So specifically in the Northeast, we have spatial issues. You know, with the limited amount of land, specifically in Newton, with nearly 40% of the city's public open space covered in tree canopy, it is very difficult to find land for athletic fields. So we have to be creative. And so turf fields do 3 times the use of grass space that we are lacking to expand more fields. Turf fields cannot be overused, no matter how much use you put on. They can handle multiple overlays. In the image to the bottom right-hand corner here, you can see how high schools have lines for soccer, lacrosse, field hockey, and football, 3 of which are fall sports, and lacrosse being a spring sport. They are predictable, dependable.
Is it just me? Does Lewis
Sure,
keep going out? Is it my internet? It's mine? Lewis is sounding good to everybody else?
No, he's going out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
If
All right,
maybe if you
let
turn your video
me-
off, and then yeah.
I'll do that, and then let me know if I'm still choppy.
Okay. Thanks. I apologize for interrupting.
No worries. It was helpful. I didn't want to sound like a scratch record here. So kind of recapping, synthetic turf fields do provide the use that we need with the limited space that we have. They can't be overused. They can handle multiple fields within one area. As you can see in the image here, we have, you know, football, field hockey, lacrosse, and soccer all lined within one field area. They can be lighted without creating compacted, unsafe play conditions like grass does. Under lights, Newton Highlands is a great example. And based on Newton South High School stadium lighting data, we have added an additional 500 hours of play at that stadium. And we have yet to collect the full data for Brandeis Road Field or Lion Drive. Turf fields provide competitive equity between both schools in Newton specifically, but also between communities. All of our neighboring communities, their high schools have access to a synthetic turf field, as many other high schools in the state. They help address limited hours to accommodate all sports needs, allow for more centralized play, and allow for earlier season practice play. Next slide. In the slide here, we really wanted to kind of make a distinction between the seasons and how synthetic turf, you know, what the seasonality of synthetic turf is versus natural grass, just again, for informational purposes for you all. So as you can see, synthetic turf can be used near year round, with the lighter green colors being areas where, you know, New England weather really limits use, at least for turf fields. Natural grass fields have a slightly shorter season, with really mid-April and into May is when the season or the fields can really be used, all the way through late September, early October. Again, due to weather and freezing conditions and rain events and such. So our goal in general is to, as a result of our master plan that you all have been privy to, we are looking to provide 2 turf fields for each of our high schools. Newton South High School has 2 fields. Newton North currently has 1 synthetic turf field. So we are looking to add one at Albemarle, as you all know. But you know, we are currently the outliers, you know, as compared to surrounding communities nearby and within the state. We have less per capita, we have less per capita and less per student athletes. And again, they can handle unlimited use. More sports are played today, and there are a lot more teams as well. And
Quick
again,
question. I'm
highlighting,
sorry.
yeah.
Less than capital of what? Less what compared to our
Less fields per capita per student athlete as as compared to our neighboring communities.
And that includes both synthetic and grass.
For synthetic alone.
And what's the number when you include both?
I do not have the full number of acreage of grass fields for other communities currently, but we can look into that. So continuing on, again, you know, turf fields, at least in our case, can help handle the extensive use that Newton Athletics requires of our fields. And also all local and private schools have turf fields within Newton and neighboring communities. So just to kind of highlight, Needham, for example, has 12 rectangular fall sports. They have 3 turf fields. North and South high schools have 12 sports each, and a total of 3 fields. So this here really highlights how neighboring communities have been able to kind of adapt to that increase in use. And the next slide, Councillor Wright kind of looks at my earlier point about fields per capita. So as you can see on the left-hand side is neighboring communities, how many students per turf fields they have as compared to Newton. And then with the proposed 4th field at Albemarle, we are significantly reducing the number of students per field. Certainly doesn't reach the level as other communities, but as of right now, this is where we are in the city's plan.
I just, though, comparing turf fields in general, and a lot of people and I agree, turf fields are not a good thing. This is not a good statistic that we'd like. So knowing the total fields, I think, is important, not just turf fields. Thank you.
Okay. So in terms of, thank you, Councillor Wright, very helpful input. So kind of going again back to other turf fields, new or newly replaced, and then you know, some of the other communities that have imposed restrictions. I think the overall concept here is that all the neighboring communities, as well as collegiate organizations, have turf fields in order to maintain that competitive edge, as opposed to their neighbors who have these as well. And now in terms of grass field usage and availability, you know, there is something to be said about grass fields. We do like those, councilors, and we do find grass fields to be very important as well. You know, we're not trying to turf the entire city, but there are some limitations to grass fields in New England with the amount of use, athletic use that our fields require. So just a high level overview, fields Grass fields are unavailable until mid-April and into May, again, depending on the weather. We have had many field closures due to rain events over the past year, 3, I believe, this spring alone. And that's across all our grass fields, which are roughly 112 acres worth. So if you can imagine, all of that use is offset or canceled. Extensive use on grass fields creates compaction, which result in poor drainage, worn goal mounts, and weed proliferation. It does not allow for sports to be overlaid like the turf fields do, and they can kind of have stacked use, if you will. We really don't have much field availability for additional teen and adults. Phase 1 softball groups, except for late evening, play at Forte, and that's you know, due to some of the overlays, as well as you can see, the outfields are used for rectangular fields as well as ball diamonds. We do not have rectangular field space to offer new groups during our spring and fall seasons, except for Sunday evenings. So it really does become a huge scheduling issue. And converting to a turf field minimizes the chaotic impact of weather, deteriorating field conditions, and need to reschedule games. And the one final point here, the high school AD must also schedule around the other schools' availability. So this shuffling of the schedules really puts an impact on our youth sports, who typically follow the high schools in terms of schedule to get onto our premier fields. And just to kind of go back and continue looking at grass fields, you know, it is a living organism that requires a lot of attention. It is like any other plant, has seasons for growth, both in their roots and in their shoots. For trees, you know, bark, stems, leaves, and such. So one of the critical pieces of grass is that, again, it has these growing seasons in the spring and in the fall, and the primary establishment period in the fall, which is the best time to establish grass seed, really falls dead smack in the beginning and middle of the fall sports season, which is really critical for lawn establishment. And then in the spring, which is the secondary establishment period, we have the same issue. So as you can see, grass will have a hard time growing to the level that is required with a lot of use. So this is why it's important to sort of maximize use and be able to also find other places to expand fields. Which segues perfectly into the our athletic fields capital plan, which you all have been aware of. But looking at Burr School, which is a grass field project, we are going from 1/2 acre of usable field space to 5 acres of usable field space. At McGrath Park, we are reconfiguring fields to improve access to rectangular fields. That buys us roughly 1 acre or so of rectangular field space as we remove the softball fields there. And at Albemarle, the reconfiguration there eliminates overlap of the ball field and rectangular fields so that more fields can be used concurrently. And this is where Albemarle as a turf field does become important, because it would be the secondary turf field for Newton North. And again, high use area is already lighted and does provide that additional use without you know, taking up valuable land. Newton North High School Stadium, we're expanding use there by adding sports lights at the stadium, and at Braceland, further down the line, looking at reconfiguring to improve access to fields. Some of the challenges that we face for some of the smaller fields in this image here, this is the recess field at the rear of Mason Rice. It is, you can see the HUD on the upper right-hand corner of the image. So these fields being unirrigated, being recess fields for schools, really take, are really played to death, if you will, as you can see in this image. And these are not fields that sports groups really would like to use due to a lot of the safety issues that are created for competitive sports on a field like this. And just to kind of also add what is required to construct a new athletic sports complex, whether it's grass or artificial turf, we would require 2 acres for a full-size, full-dimension regulation field. Soccer is the largest of all of those fields, as compared to football, lacrosse, and field hockey. But that field with all the supporting areas and run-out zones are, again, roughly 2 acres. Plus, we would need to account for parking, which is approximately 1 acre. As you know, these fields draw coaches, referees, athletes, spectators, and upcoming game crowds. In terms of athletic needs, counting in a 4th artificial turf at Albemarle, which totals 8 acres, 4 at Newton South, 2 at Newton North, and then 2 additional here at Albemarle, we can make significant impact to the demand and quality of fields that would otherwise require 24 acres of exclusive field space. And what I mean by exclusive field space is that because grass is such an intricate science, we would need to essentially reduce the amount of permitting for these high school and youth sports regulation fields, which in turn make them exclusive to, say, just lacrosse or just soccer or just football. And any new sites are competing with housing and other potential uses, and along with you know, woods and conservation areas as well. So this image is just for illustrative purposes, kind of showing the scale. The city does not have any intention to look into this. This was just a graphic that we created to kind of highlight how grass fields would need to be spread out in order to meet the needs if we didn't have turf fields. So again, this is not at all part of our proposal and not something that the city is entertaining, but just for informational purposes. Oh, sorry about that. Okay, so apologies here. So converting to synthetic turf is roughly 2 million. Some of the considerations that we do have to take into account when even considering converting to synthetic, as we have in Albemarle, and just in general in parks and open spaces, it does change the nature of an open space area in terms of you know, aesthetics. Turf fields do require some enclosure and separation from grass. So it does change that character, and it does generate waste, reuse, and recycle aspect of, again, it being a synthetic material, and needs to be resurfaced or replaced every 10 years. And then, of course, all the benefits cited previously as to how this type of field does address the need with the limited land. In terms of land acquisition, you know, for a new field, we would need, again, the 2 acres plus the 1 acre of for parking to be accounted for, along with any additional access and other appurtenances, along with potential soil mitigation and such. Other considerations and impacts: parking, lighting, traffic that are generated in new areas, increased water use, fertilizer, IPM, and mowing. As you all may be aware, grass doesn't grow when it's not watered necessarily. So mowing is less frequent, whereas watering for athletic fields requires more frequent mowing. To add additional grass fields, we would also require additional staff, wages, and benefits. So overall, looking at the differences in the two, again, just making a distinction of what it takes to maintain a grass field and what it takes to maintain a synthetic turf field. But at the end of the day, it's about meeting and addressing the need of the athletics in Newton. So some additional info, again, highlighting what I noted earlier: irrigation, fertilization, thatching, seeding, aeration. All of these are required for a high quality grass turf field. Whereas synthetic is less maintenance heavy, as it doesn't require watering, mowing, and things like that. But again, it does require the reuse and recycling. In terms of the synthetic turf materials that we're looking at, we did go, at least for the turf replacement at Newton South High School, we did go before the Newton Conservation Commission. They have ordered an order of conditions, which has been filed with the registry, so that we can test the turf and infill materials that we are putting down this summer. Again, to confirm or get a sense of the constituent chemicals. In terms of, and this is for both turf and infill, for the infill, we are moving away from crumb rubber and rubber in general, and are going with TPE for infill, which reduces heat, is more durable, can be reused for the next cycle, and it resembles more a natural grass field in terms of play. And with that, I will hand it over to Commissioner Banks, unless folks have some questions in the meantime.
There are a couple of hands up, so I'm guessing that they pertain to at least what we've been through so far. So if it's a good breaking point, Louis, I'll see if maybe we can take those questions now. Okay, Councillor Wright, you have your hand up again?
Yes, I have a few. First off, where's Braceland?
Braceland is Upper Falls Playground.
Okay. And synthetic turf has a yearly antimicrobial cleaning. Is that correct? And is that in the cost of the $700 for 10 years?
Thank you, Councillor Wright, for that question. For outdoor synthetic turf fields, we would only require that should there be, blood loss on the field, if you will, and extensive injuries. The sanitation is more for indoor synthetic turf fields where it's not exposed to rain, UV rays, and such.
So only if there is a lot of blood on the field will the outdoor.
Exactly. And to date, we have not needed to do that kind of treatment to our current fields.
Okay. And what about right now? There's no verifiable possibility of recycling. That seems like an issue. The recycling of the material.
So we are, Councillor Wright, going to have, and we have had this discussion with the contractor who's replacing the turf at Newton South, and they are going to provide a bill of lading which essentially is a chain of custody paperwork that shows where the turf field is going, and they understand that they need to send it to a recycling facility.
Okay, have they told us where it's going to be going from south, and has it been verified as a proper disposal, the field itself?
They have not provided that info, Counselor. We're still awaiting for a bunch of their submittals prior to the start of their work, and that's one of them. Okay,
and part of the docket item was having I thought an outside person to answer some of this, not just internally. Was that done, or is all these questions were answered just internally?
Oh, we have consultants, Counselor, working on our field projects. Some of them are present here. Commissioner, did you have something you wanted to add?
No, that's okay.
So are they all, though, artificial turf consultants?
They're landscape architects who do work on grass fields and synthetic turf and, you know, trails and park projects. So it's a broad spectrum of services that they provide, not just synthetic turf, but they do have an expertise in that field.
Okay, I'm going to have some more questions, but I'll let someone else ask some right now. Thank you.
So Chair Kritzman, this is actually the last slide for this portion of the presentation. So I just wondered if we might want to finish the presentation and then take questions so that it won't.
Sure, Councilor Humphrey, are you okay waiting a minute?
Yeah, I can wait.
Okay, go ahead, Commissioner Banks. I apologize. I thought I had meant to ask if it was a good point to.
Sure, no
so.
problem, no problem. And I did try to build in some stopping points because I did figure we'd have some great questions here this evening. So I did just, before I go through our software system and how we do our athletic field permitting, just to answer a little bit of Councilor Wright's questions from earlier. We do permit 36 locations for grass fields. And some of our larger locations do have multiple fields. So if you think about McGrath and Weeks and Albemarle, those are, one location, but they have multiple fields. And our non-irrigated sites and our elementary school sites, such as the photo that we saw of Mason Rice, are very, very limited use. So those do get used in the fall because it gets dark so early. But they are not ideal for the permitting for most of our sports and athletics. And so just to complete out the program for the athletic fields oversight in the department, this is one that President Albright had reached out to me about, and I think was included in here to basically make sure that we had adequate software that we can use to track the use of fields and the scheduling of fields. Really trying to see if we are missing out on a product that could do more. I was able to talk with our admin staff and our recently retired field scheduler, Sheila Butts, and do just want to really acknowledge what Sheila has been doing for the department with the field scheduling, the amount of work, but also really supporting all of our field representatives, our youth sport groups, and our school department, athletic departments. She has always been so professional and really has done everything that she can to make sure we get every minute of field use time on our fields. To give you an idea, our department, Sheila has worked for multiple departments in the Parks and Rec industry. We have just hired a new field scheduler, Aaron Friedman, and he comes to us with some extensive experience from other departments, and I have also worked for multiple departments. We have reviewed all of the programs that we have experience with. We've been to conferences and seen demonstrations on what is available in the community. And the Newton Parks and Rec Department has recently audited its system. They did make a change right before I started working here to our, to what we had for our management reservation system. And ultimately, I would say, you know, the system that we use does do more than just field scheduling. So we needed to do our program registrations and communicate with our customers, all of our billing and point of sale, many things that it does, our aquatics pass systems that we have for our pool and the lake. So there was many things that were evaluated. But really what it came down to is there was two main widely used systems in the region. One of them was the system that we had previously in the department, and one is the system that was selected and that we changed to. They really were very similar for the field scheduling components, but the system that we have changed to now was stronger in some of those other areas, such as the program side of registration. As far as field bookings, the fields are fully booked during our peak times. And we do, you know, our needs that we're sharing here tonight are really more about the availability during those spring and fall sports seasons. The only thing that we're really not tracking is we work with a lot of volunteers who put together their schedules. When things change, there's makeup games, or maybe a coach doesn't have a practice on a certain date, we don't make them cancel, and we don't rebook that field space as that happens. You know, and that's kind of, we just look at it as it's a nice opportunity for the field to get rested. And in summary, I would just say that, you know, we're very comfortable with the system we have. It's a good software system that is widely used in the industry. And we believe it's doing everything that we need it to do to track and manage our permitting for the fields. And that does bring us to the end of the first portion of the presentation, you know, which, as I said, has a lot of information. So certainly expecting those questions. Luis, I don't know if you want to turn off the screen share for questions. We can always bring it back up if anyone wants to see a particular slide.
Fabulous, thank you.
And can I also please just recognize Michael Jackson has joined us. He is the athletic director at Newton North. Welcome.
Thank you. I did notice that he joined us. I was a little disappointed that he doesn't have the LSU Wake Forest game on his TV, but rather, you know, fish swimming, but that's okay. Go Tigers. Councillor Humphrey, followed by President Albright. Councillor Humphrey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for my clarity, before I start asking questions, what is the rest of the presentation covering? Like just the topics?
So the next topic is the discussion on the field maintenance plan. So this is very similar to what we presented on, I think it was in February. It's just an updated, you know, we finished out a couple more seasons for field maintenance. And then we have a discussion on our plan for capital improvements. And that's basically also the project list that was previously shared that has been updated.
Okay,
so I apologize for introducing all three items. I thought, you know, it was sort of one big presentation. That was my misunderstanding. I should have done it one at a time.
And I'm happy to do it that way if that makes more sense. I just
no, this is better.
I just stop.
I think I think it's fine to have them all on the table and just take breaks at various points like this. But that's anyway. So I guess one thing that we heard a tiny bit about, but I was hoping for a little bit more elaboration, and this was something I think I asked for in the docket item, was with regard to the actual grass fields and their maintenance. We've been having various discussions recently about things like phosphorus runoff and so forth in the city, because there's now a big federal mandate about reducing phosphorus runoff across the whole community and that kind of thing. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about pesticides, fertilizers, other treatments, things like that do get used on the grass fields. You know, I tend to think that the grass fields are better, but I just want to get some clarity in terms of environmentally what the actual downsides and associated challenges are environmentally from the grass fields, because they are certainly not a natural part of our landscape either. And, you know, I know there are not a lot of good pollinator opportunities and things like that. So, you know, there's challenges, and I'd like to hear a little bit more about that.
Luis, would you like me to take that one?
Sure, I'm less involved in the IPM and such, so.
So we do have an IPM program, Counselor Humphrey, which is our integrated pest management program. And we do implement fertilizers, grub control. We're treating for broadleaf weeds, mostly on the athletic fields. It is a very targeted program. So this current year, we're treating 4 sites. And we are expending about $6,000 of our total investment for the athletic field. So, you know, it's not a huge piece of what we do. Most of what we do on our grass fields is an organic program. We do have, you know, phosphorus and nitrogen are a part of what's needed for the fields in our fertilization, and you know, that's just part of they're needed to be able to keep the turf. I would say there's also, you know, the mowing and the water components for the grass are the other area where we see some environmental concerns. So they are being maintained to a higher level than, you know, our larger amount of parks and open space is.
During drought conditions, have we been having trouble keeping the water to a reasonable, I guess, usage in the sense of both keeping the grass alive and not having tons of it just evaporating away immediately because it doesn't sink in?
So we just had one of the driest summers on record, and it was, our water use was very, very high. And we rely on those irrigation systems to be able to keep the grass in good condition. I'm in the next part of the presentation, I am going to talk about some of the investments that we've made into our irrigation costs and how we have made some improvements to wells. We have tried to have many of our athletic fields are on well systems and repairs to the irrigation as well. So there is, it is a significant piece of what's needed. Louise, do you want to add anything else for the irrigation piece?
The only thing that I would like to add is that we do try to, or we have irrigation on a early morning schedule, so that, you know, the grass can actually soak up the water before the sun's high heat, if you will. So that's a way that we kind of manage that. But yeah, you pretty much summed it up perfectly, Commissioner.
The costs also associated with the water are very, very high. We do have some of our grass fields that are connected to the city water system, and we are going to be looking at doing some exploration work into switching over some of those sites to wells. I mentioned that we just went through one of the driest summers on record. The Newton North High School irrigation costs going through this past year were close to $90,000. So it's a huge impact to the budget.
Yeah, I mean, the tough thing in this entire discussion is that there's, on the one hand, very real budgetary pressures, and on the other hand, there's all these other things that we have to balance. And I know from past discussions that, you know, I don't know how much regulation there is in terms of athletic standards on like what kind of things are physically used on those grass fields, like even the type of grass. I don't know if that's something that's regulated or not, but like I've heard complaints about, you know, oh, there's too much clover in the fields that's then dies off and creates these divots and you can break your ankle and things like that. And on the other hand, I don't know, it's always going to be tough no matter what type of material we use. It's always going to be tough environmentally to have these sort of manicured huge areas that are not particularly wild in any way. And I don't know if there's like options that we could use that would be more drought tolerant, require less water, require less pesticides, things like that. And I know there would probably be a cost associated with making those conversions. If there is, that's something we should be trying to look, you know, see if the state can help with any of that kind of thing, just because it's going to keep getting worse. Like every year, there's going to be more likelihood of these drought conditions. There's going to be more other sort of environmental challenges associated. And so whether we're talking turf or grass, we're going to have to be dealing with something there. Getting back to the sort of bigger picture, you've talked a lot about the NPS sort of athletics uses of the fields and then the other uses. And so it sounds like that our own public uses are prioritized already above the private uses if there's a conflict or schedule issue, et cetera. And I understand that. In general, has the usage of these fields, or at least the demand for usage, grown tremendously in the past, say, like 20, 30 years? Because I know that there's the challenge that we've lost some fields due to, you know, under maintenance and overuse and things like that. But in terms of the actual, like, if everything were fully up to the maintenance levels we need, would we still be having capacity issues as it stands now? And is that a trend line that has been happening, or because you talked about the challenge of finding other space that you could use for fields, right? That's in competition with other potential needs in the city. So I'm just trying to get a sense of where the trend has been in terms of the overall demand.
Sure, I can Commissioner, I can chime in, and then it looks like Pat Gonzalez has some thoughts here. You know, the numbers have grown, at least for youth sports. I know that the high schools have seen an uptick in student athletes. So Pat, feel free to chime in on the numbers you're seeing at the high school.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Just referring to your comment, Councilor Humphrey, the last 20 years alone, you know, that our high school alone grew up from being 700 students to 2,000. Every season, we have around 500 students participating and using the fields. And, you know, even in the spring, which is usually the numbers seems to be low with the graduation and seniors not committed, we see an increase of participation at the lower levels. For what I see empirically for the youth programs is constant use of the fields. I usually come to the schools on weekends, even if we don't have games, and it's every single inch of field space is used. So yes, you know, I can say that at least for the high school, our numbers are growing every single season. I've been here for 10 years and, you know, I have seen the growth in all these times.
Along those lines too, the later dismissal creates a little bit of congestion in terms of like
right
when we get off fields and when people can get on fields. So that has created a little bit of a challenge in terms of scheduling too, just because, you know, we're at an off-site field, especially on the north side, if we're using Cabot or Lincoln Elliott or Warren, we really can't start a practice until about 4:30 during the week, which just doesn't leave a lot of daylight hours for people to use them. And as the fall decreases daylight, it becomes more of a challenge. Obviously in the spring, we start to gain some of that too. So that I'm sure that's creating some issues for Park and Rec as well.
All right, I appreciate that clarification. It's good to have that reminder about the effect from the daylight hours. So those are my questions, but I'm just going to make a sort of general comment here and then leave it there. I think when we're talking on the zoning side of things that we spend a lot of time on, there's been a lot of use of that term, a built out city. And to some extent, I disagree with the application of that term, but I think we've heard tonight that this is one of the challenges facing the question of athletics here, is just that we don't have a lot of land opportunities where we could be doing fields. And even if something comes available, then there's potential questions of, should it be used for some other type of recreational land? Should it be used for housing development, et cetera? These are all fair and valid questions that have to be balanced with that. And I am kind of getting to a point on this where, you know, I'm cognizant of the budgetary pressure that lends itself towards saying, well, we should just convert more of these to the synthetic turf. And I'm really having trouble getting behind that, because while I understand that would make a lot of things easier and free up some things budgetarily, it may be that we have reached a point, unfortunately, where we have to say, sorry, we're at capacity. And we're not going to have more fields. We're going to have to limit the fields usage that we have on our existing fields. you know, the strategy would probably be to sort of economize to the ones that we do have, improve the existing conditions of those fields. But the issue of cost per field, the issue of maintenance is not the only issue here. Obviously, we have to balance the budget and everything, but that might mean that we're going to have to make some hard choices and say, no, we're at capacity, and we don't have the ability to have everyone who wants to have field access have field access. That's going to obviously require even more rationing than we're already doing. And I wouldn't want to see that done by cost alone. But, you know, one of the things that happened is we put athletic fields into the operating override referendum, and it didn't pass. And there were a lot of folks who spent, you know, a couple of years leading up to that override coming to this committee and saying how important it was that we have additional fields money, additional fields maintenance, et cetera. And I agreed, that made complete sense to me. And I understood that that was an investment to improve the city, make the city more attractive and desirable and competitive with our peer communities and so forth. But it didn't pass. And I also didn't see a lot of them out there advocating for it to pass, which is fine. That's their right. But it didn't pass. We have to respect what the voters have said on this. And one of the things that they seem to have said is that there's only a certain point at which they're willing to spend money on some of this field stuff. I think it needs to be more than what it had been, and I'm glad that we've moved in the right direction on that. But I think that if it comes down to this question of, well, should we just convert a bunch more fields to synthetic turf because it would add a lot more capacity and save us a lot of money, I don't think that's good enough. I understood the rationale for making the upgrades and replacements to the ones we already had. That decision kind of felt locked in when they made those conversions. But I think we're really locking ourselves into something that we're going to be in a lot of trouble for having done, 15 years down the line. Environmentally, just doesn't seem to pencil out that way. Liability wise, I think there's a lot of really serious concerns. I know that there would be a lot of benefits and advantages to doing that, but I think that we have to say this is not a good option for us and we can't be converting more. And if that means telling people that we don't have the capacity to meet the level of demand, I'm sorry, but that is what it is, given our geographic location, given our level of density, et cetera. And maybe somebody should have, thought about that 30 years ago, 40 years ago, and set aside more land for some of these fields, but they didn't. And that's what we're stuck with. And that's what we're going to have to live with. I think that's unfortunate, but that is sort of the reality of, the finances at a municipal level. And I think that it would be a mistake to be adding additional synthetic turf fields in places that we currently have grass fields. And I'm saying that also aware that these grass fields are not themselves, environmental oases either. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Humphrey. I just sort of in fairness to, the presentation, the docket item called for a cost benefit analysis of the grass fields and the synthetic fields. I do think they did that. Again, we can differ on where we go from here. But I do think it was a fair presentation.
No, I understood that, and I was one of the co-docketers. I'm just saying that my conclusion after receiving the information was that there's other things there, and they outweigh that. Thank you.
Understood. Thank you. President Albright, followed by Councilor Greenberg. President Albright.
Thank you. So this wasn't what I intended to say, but I feel like I must say it. There's lots of reasons why overrides fail. And they don't always have to do with the right reasons. We had some councilors who were going around saying there's plenty of money, we don't need an override. We had lots of people angry about the fact that the schools were closed during the pandemic. There's lots of reasons why overrides fail, and we shouldn't take a sampling of one failed override and say that applies to the future of Newton forever. So I think we should all think very clearly about that. There will be future overrides, and there will be future opportunities to have them pass. And hopefully there'll be more councilors who are thinking more clearly about the financial needs of Newton. So I felt like I needed to say that after that statement about the failed override. And I don't think this is the time to say, sorry, kids, sorry, Newton, you can't have any more sports. We don't have any more fields. I don't think that's the time, this is the time to do that either. I think problem solving is a better solution than saying we're done, no more fields. That being said, I was a little concerned about the PFAS statement, and maybe you could speak to it a little bit more. Maybe you could put that slide up again where it said they make representations that I don't even remember what the slide said at this point. Could somebody remind me what it did say?
Louis, do you have that?
Yes, I'm bringing it up now, and we do have Chair and President Albright. We do have folks from CDM Smith who are very well versed in PFAS and those types of chemicals. So sorry, just a second. I'm bringing that up now.
I apologize if you can hear the puppy complaining. She's been put in jail for being a bad dog. Now
No
she's
such thing as bad dogs, President Albright, only bad owners.
Well, I didn't do it, my son did it.
There's lots of things with bad kids. I'm with you on that one.
So this is Councilor Albright. This is the quotes are just a statement from the manufacturer. We're certainly not trying to represent on their behalf. This is just something that they've written to us. But again, I do want to have folks from CDM Smith chime in on PFAS and where we are in the testing portion of.
Yeah, before they do, I just want to reference that the SHA does not intentionally use any PFAS containing material. That statement does not give me security. I mean, what the hell does that mean? Sorry.
Oh, fair statement.
So there's no additional PFAS added. Great.
It's not intentionally added as it is for a lot of products. You know, non-stick pot products, carpeting, many things have it intentionally added. This is something that's not an actual ingredient in the turf.
Intentionally.
Right. So like, for example, they can add like a spray of a PFAS chemical to a food wrapper to make it less, likely to stick. That's not what's happening in this product.
Okay.
But there are PFAS on, everything. There's exposure to PFAS. So it's just not intentionally being added.
There are byproducts, to the commissioner's point, that have these chemicals. So they're not looking to add it. But I do understand President Albright, how that comment, what that comment implies. But I would really like to, if possible, call on the CDM Smith folks to chime in a bit on the on PFAS in general, if that's something that the committee would like to hear from.
Yeah, so those are folks who are here who I don't know.
We have Heather Lanza. She is the PFAS expert, and she did present at a community meeting and perhaps at a city council meeting for the site synthetic. Heather?
Yeah. Ms. Lanza, do you want to speak to that?
Yes, please. Thank you. And thank you, President Albright, for that question. As Louise had mentioned in some of our previous meetings, there was some concern about the historical manufacturing processes associated with turf. It was thought to be used as an extrusion aid in the mold to prevent the turf blades from sticking to the mold. However, as you can see from the statement from SHA, they've moved away from that manufacturing process, so there is no intentional use of PFAS. However, we have been undertaking sampling in accordance with the Conservation Commission Order of Conditions. So we've tested both the turf and the infill material for PFAS using the 3 methods that we had discussed at our previous meetings. Louise, would you like me to go into more detail on that?
If you have more detail, that would be helpful.
Sure. Yeah, so we use three methods. I'm not going to go into a chemistry lecture for you all today, but you can kind of think of PFAS as an iceberg, where we've got the, what's above the surface. That's what we can measure. Those are the analytes we know of. And then there's also this kind of, what's under the water, right, that we can't measure. And so we use different analytical methods to try and get at that big picture and characterize the entirety of the iceberg, if you will. So we use those different methods. The TP infill did not have any measurable PFAS by any of those three methods. In the turf product, we saw some very inconsistent detections of PFAS at extremely low levels. Those detections for 1 to 3 analytes were hovering around the method reporting limit. So that's the concentration that the laboratory can measure with confidence. And these detections were primarily associated with what's called the post-oxidation sample using one of those three methods called the total oxidizable precursor assay, or the TOP assay. And so this method is very, very aggressive. There's a lot of heat, a lot of oxidation, alkaline conditions. It's not representative of environmental conditions. And the whole point is to try and bring that kind of hidden part of the iceberg to the surface, if you will, to push the chemistry into those analytes we can measure. And what we saw is that there's not significant PFAS available, that could ultimately be converted over time in the environment.
So, excuse me, I don't. Are you the seller of the turf?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am.
Now, could you just explain, Louise? Perhaps you could explain who is CD Smith?
Oh, yes. So CDM Smith, President Albright, is our landscape architecture and engineering consulting firm. They are not the manufacturer of turf or sell it. They have just helped us with the drawings, material selection, specifications, managing the contractor, as well as managing the testing for the materials per the order.
If I could add in really quick to Luis's comment there, I've worked with CDM Smith for over 30 years in chemistry around water supply protection. This is what they do. They are specialists in environmental resource management and working for drinking water supply agencies and others, including situations like this, looking at synthetic turf. So these are professionals who have very, very substantial experience in this field. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I'm not exactly sure I understood everything you said, Heather. But it feels like in order to meet the needs of the sports and athletics in Newton, we need. You're making the case that we need these synthetic turf fields, and you said 8 acres of turf equals 24 acres of grass. So how many more turf fields do we need besides the ones that are being discussed now?
So President Albright, right now we feel most comfortable with just adding that one additional turf field at Albemarle, both, from just the parks and open space preservation perspective, as well as, just budgetary. At the end of the day, they do have to be replaced every so often and such. So putting too many does put a strain in that regard. But as Commissioner Banks stated, there are some leagues that are interested in having an additional one beyond that through a public-private partnership. And we don't see that as detrimental. It does help provide an impact to the need. But again, that's something that the city would entertain through a proposal should that come to our desks.
Okay.
I can speak really quick, President Albright, to the need on the north side, because we have one turf field right now. from a standpoint of multiple teams, boys and girls soccer, field hockey, football, all sharing a turf field in the fall, the challenge of a 3:45 dismissal and trying to get all those teams an opportunity to practice is next to impossible. And then when we have weather come in, if we have to not be on grass, the mounting issue of rescheduling, if we can't use a synthetic turf to be able to have contests, becomes a real issue for us, that we're not able to get in a full season just because we don't have the opportunity to get on a field enough times for all of our teams to be able to play. And a perfect example, we lost access to our Lowell Avenue field, which is our main grass field, for 6 weeks in the fall. And it was the single most challenging thing I did this whole school year, was trying to figure out where we put those teams on a daily basis, like where we play games, where we practice. It was just musical fields for 6 weeks for me to be able to try to make sure we got those teams an opportunity to practice on a quality field and play. So for us to have one turf field right now, you know, I know our competitors, Natick, Needham, I was at Needham, they have 3 turf fields. I know Natick has multiple. I know Wellesley has multiple. So it puts us at a real competitive disadvantage, and it also puts us just at a disadvantage to be able to get games in. So I don't want to get too long-winded on that, but I lived through that one this year, and it was a really tough situation.
So what I'm getting from what you just said, and also from the slides, was that our neighboring communities that we play games with and against have more turf fields than we do. Yes, everyone does. And almost everyone does, but yes.
And can I just add that, you know, because our schools have that priority scheduling, that then trickles down the effects to all of our youth sport groups, who are then, I mean, there's just not places to have them go that are, you know, reasonable, well-kept, safe athletic fields to put them on. So they just have to cancel and most likely don't get their makeups in.
So the problem that we're having as a council is that we are being told that PFAS is dangerous and hurtful to the kids. And we are not clear as to whether, and Heather, if there's any way that you could write what you said in layman's language, and or, you know, I would be forever grateful, because I'm not sure I understood everything that you explained in your chemistry lecture there.
Louis, do you think we could ask you to sort of email us some information about that?
Yeah, and in fact, CDM Smith is putting together a memo that we have to share with the Conservation Commission. We'll share with you as well, that info once we have it.
I think that's perfect.
But Heather, if you wouldn't mind perhaps just briefly touching on, you know, the regulations, and I know solids versus drinking water are different. So if you can just highlight very briefly the difference and what the detection rates were as compared to the regulations.
Of course, yeah, thanks, Luis. So yeah, there are, as you can imagine, no turf-specific regulations. The state of Massachusetts does have drinking water regulations, and the US EPA is proposing federal drinking water standards as well. There are non-enforceable guidance values for soil. As Louise mentioned, though, it's not really appropriate to apply these in an apples to apples style comparison because of the different exposure assumptions, right? Time spent in a residential garden, for example, versus time spent on a field. All of those assumptions matter in the calculation of these values. However, that being said, you know, for reference, the turf detections that we are seeing, again, it's just a couple of analytes right at the kind of level that the lab can confidently measure. They are below the residential soil screening values protective of human health by a couple orders of magnitude, depending on if you're looking at the state or the federal guidance values at this time.
Okay.
So I hope that speaks to your question.
It does, and I look forward to your layman's terms that explain all that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thanks, President Albright. Councilor Greenberg?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate Commissioners Banks and Louise's presentation. I have a better and clearer understanding of the cost and maintenance difference between the grass and the artificial turf fields. I'm more convinced that the turf field is probably the best solution for the needs at this point. And after hearing Ms. Lanza's report about the PFAS in the turf field, I feel more comfortable. Can I just try to reiterate what you said, that the PFAS is like an iceberg, and at the tip of the iceberg there was a small amount found, but then when you tried to bring out the rest of the PFAS that may have been underwater, it was not, you were not able to find any PFAS there. Is that correct?
Sort of. So yeah, I apologize for any confusion there. So because there are so many different chemicals within this class, right? There's only a subset of those that we can measure in the laboratory. So there's a lot of kind of what we call unknown PFAS that would be kind of, quote, under the water in this iceberg analogy. One of the methods that we used is intended to kind of chemically push those chemicals that we can't currently measure to ones that we can. So it's a process, a chemical reaction ultimately that drives any unknown PFAS into known PFAS. And so what we saw were that we had a couple of detections following that oxidation, that chemical reaction at very, very low levels. And what that tells us, though, is that there's not a lot of unknown PFAS, beneath the water, if you will, that could potentially exist in that turf that we can't measure by these kind of standard methods. Okay. Does that make sense?
No, that makes it clear. And that the tip of the iceberg did find some PFAS?
We had one detection, yes, using that kind of target standard method, yes. But again, very low, right at the limit of reporting, which is what the lab can reliably measure.
Okay, thank you. That's much clearer. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Wright. I do still see your hand up, but Councilor Ryan hasn't spoken yet, so I'm going to go to her first, then I'll come back to you, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Ryan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wasn't quite ready. I'm going to, first, I'm going to go on record as saying that the pushback of the start time, I knew right from the beginning was going to be a problem in some area, and this is the area. And it's not the whole problem, but it is a contributing factor to the times that the fields are being used, and the especially in the after daylight savings time in the fall and the winter. But there's a question I want to ask, because I was big into sports, and I was good, and I was outdoor sports, and I just feel it's just such a big part of going to middle school and high school, especially. If we left everything the way it is right now, with the number of turf fields and the number of grass fields, and I know the whole, I'm not going to get in, I know the whole deal with the maintenance on the grass fields, and that my question is so who's going to suffer? So the first kids that are going to use the fields are the school kids, Newton South, Newton North, and the middle schools. Am I correct? And then
that's correct. And
then the trickle down will be, I mean, I didn't even know, do we still do intramural sports in school? Do we still do out? I mean, that's what we used to call it in my day. You'd even have flag football in high school. And you got to play that in the field too. But so then what the ones that would suffer then would be our, our sports leagues, our which I was in too, was you know, you know, soccer and our,
Lacrosse.
football and, you know, they're not a non-school affiliated, which is a great part of being a great city also. I know we have to have some fees involved there, but those are the ones that would suffer if we didn't add any fields and just left everything the way it is.
That's correct, Counselor Ryan. They will be the ones that would take the biggest hit. They are very, very numerous. They just have a lot of athletes, and youth sports are a segue into middle school and high school sports. So the youth sports are really setting that foundation for kids to then get to Pat and Mike and be on those teams and compete across the state. So yes, they'll be losing out.
I mean, did the people from Newton South and Newton North agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. But
I
we have,
was- If Luis hadn't have said that, I was about to chime in and say,
Okay.
if we start to lose access for our youth teams, it's going to have a direct effect on our high school sports going forward.
Okay, I mean, I just want to make, what I'm saying is our high school sports, our school affiliated outdoor sports will have the first usage. And then, so, all right,
Counselor Ryan, can I just add the result of it too, is that the younger kids in those youth sports programs are out on the fields later in the evening too. So that's sometimes stretching to 8:30, 9 p.m. For their practices and games.
all right, and I know that adding the lights, well, a few years ago at the stadium, which also I had to explain to people about the Friday night lights games. If you're in the, you know, the league, the state wants everyone to have at least one Friday night lights football game a year. And then we having the lights added to Brandeis Field. This is my ward, Ward 8. So I was involved in that, very much involved in that. But if you push the school start time back, you needed those lights. I mean, and that we just had to make sure they were right for the neighbors. But you know, we've had a whole bunch of things happen that once again puts us here right now. So that's, I wanted to make sure that's said, that I just think that the kids come first. If athletics like band and drama is part of your school experience, and we can't ever let that go. Thank you.
I'll also just recognize our two athletic directors here. They do really make great efforts to share that space with the youth sports groups. And, you know, a big thanks for doing that. Those are the kids coming up through the program. And, you know, Pat has made some of that evening time available, and with the lights at North, you know, and at Albemarle, we'll be looking to do the same. So it's been well supported. It's a cooperative partnership for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Ryan, and always like hearing about the former athletic careers. I don't think it was directly on point that you were good, but I do appreciate you mentioning that nonetheless. Councilor Wright?
Thank you. First off, I was taking a look at the docket item. I'm a data person, and it seemed like there should have been a lot more data, and I'm hoping that you could provide that. And, you know, there's a lot more numbers talking about the field usages and, you know, just more details instead of just some general slides. The second thing is, in New England, Mass, Connecticut, Vermont, and Maine have going through their state house bills to ban artificial turf. And Boston has said no more additional artificial turf. I mean, there are a lot of problems with artificial turf, and we're just, you know, learning more and more as we go along. And Albemarle is the wrong place to put it. It floods. It's going to flood more, and it's just going to go right into the Charles River. Our rains are going to be harder and just more pushing back the start time. And I do realize it's going to put a lot of pressure on the field, but we have less students. We have 200 or 300 less students in Newton Public Schools. You know, what we've been told, you know, the student population in general, the children population is going way down. So I think the big problem is the start time versus, you know, the number of people participating is actually going down. But the thing is, you know, you were comparing how many artificial turfs fields we have compared to the other communities, but we have a lot of grass fields. So it's not really comparing apples to apples. When you're talking about, you're comparing the number of fields, but you're not comparing the number of hours that the teams have on the fields. And, you know, some towns may not have as many grass fields as we do. Yes, so that's about it. But I'd like to get more data as part of this docket item, which wasn't put in this presentation.
The docket item, Councilor Wright, is 6323. This is the request for a discussion with city staff regarding cost benefit analysis on grass fields.
Yeah, I think
Oh, go ahead, Pat.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna ask some information that may be helpful to Councilor Wright. Last year, Newton South used 3,061 hours of grass fields and 3,300 hours of turf fields. So the use of grass and turf is maximized to the edge of we can use. And, you know, say because of the lights, we're able to extend the use of turf fields more. And I know that the youth programs got a limit the access to grass fields because either we use it or there is no lights on there. So I hope that helps.
One small thing for Newton North as well. In my 2 years at Newton North, we have had over 700 students try out for sports in the fall and the spring. And we've had about 620 or 630 participate in those 2 seasons each of my 2 years. And according to the numbers that we're gonna get, that's gonna increase. So we are looking at an increase in the number of student athletes that are gonna be participating to a number that's really a huge number to start. So just some clarity there.
And I'll just add that we have had a full year with the Newton South Stadium lights, and we had scheduled about 500 hours of light use on that one field in that full year of use. So having the lights on the artificial turf fields is significantly increasing the amount of time available. I don't know, Sheila, if you have anything to add for the youth sports and permitting, any data, or we could put that together.
I mean, I can put together, once we get their spring numbers, I can put together the spring and fall numbers for the youth sports groups. We just haven't compiled all the spring numbers yet, but there's well over 3,000 youth soccer players, both including the boys and girls, the youth league and girls league each season. So that's, you know, 200 teams at least that need practice time. You know, so it's pretty challenging. Both Pat and Mike have been great when trying to, you know, get off fields, grass fields in time, especially, well, in the spring, it's not as problematic. In the fall, it's next to impossible to get them anytime before dark because of the needs of the schools, be it the high schools or the middle schools.
Okay, I'll send it. I'm actually, my husband's driving. We're around Chicago right now. I'll send an email tomorrow and, you know, copy the docket item and what data that I thought it was going to be. That would be helpful if that you could provide that. Thank
Sure.
you.
Happy to.
All right, I see 3 more hands up. I just want to remind folks it's about 9:20. We do have a couple more items to hear from Parks, Rec, and Culture on, and then one last item to come back to as a committee. So not to cut anyone off, but just remind you where we're at. I see Councillor Noel, who hasn't yet spoken, and then I'll come back to President Albright and Councillor Humphrey. Councillor Noel?
Thank you. So I got here a little bit late, but I've received a lot of emails about concern about adding turf fields to the city of Newton. So I have no doubt from what I've heard that there is a tremendous need for field use. I also can appreciate Councillor Humphrey's perspective of the fields were tied to the override, which didn't pass. So we're simply one committee. We don't run the budget. The mayor runs the budget. We do vote on items, but we're one committee of 8 people that we do represent members of the city of Newton, but I don't think that we have a mandate, particularly with the concerns about the turf fields, to continue to expand turf fields in the city. I just am not sure that the political will is there to expand upon turf fields. I know in this meeting, clearly the demand has been identified, but I think that we need to expand the political will for wanting more fields in the city. And how do we meet our climate goals and expand fields? Because I don't feel like I have a mandate in this meeting to authorize more turf fields based on what I'm hearing from my constituents.
Thanks, Councillor Noel. President Albright.
Thank you. I was going to propose that we move hold on this item because I know Councillor Wright has some questions, and we're going to get some more information from the Parks and Rec and from their consultants. Is it CD Smith? I got that right?
CDM Smith.
CDM Smith. So I would like to move hold on this item, and I think that, from the time that I went to Newton High School, there are more sports offered, right? There was no lacrosse when I was there. It was basically the only sport for girls was field hockey, as I recall, and softball.
Did you play field hockey or softball?
I did not.
Sorry, Councillor Ryan. I don't know what we can do with her, but okay, go ahead, President Albright.
So I mean, the sports available to the kids have expanded tremendously. So we've heard from some environmental folks who feel that artificial turf is bad for our health and bad for the environment. We have not heard from all the parents who have kids who play these sports, who want their kids to play these sports. So in terms of political will, if you want to start a battle, there's one battle that could be an interesting one, which I don't know that we want to do that, but that could very well happen if we don't allow for something to happen here to break the dam on the availability of kids playing fields. So I think we need more information. I don't think we're there yet, and I'd like us to move hold and have the opportunity to ask our questions. Councillor Wright has some, I have some, others have some, and then come back and do this again, another conversation.
Thank you. President Albright has moved hold, so let me hear a discussion on that motion. Councillor Humphrey?
I'm fine with holding because I think the discussion's definitely not over, but I want to just expand on what Councillor Noel said and also defend my earlier remark and clarify. I mean, I don't know why we're getting scolded on this tonight because it's a legitimate debate, but I'm not anti-sports by any means, and I want people to have the athletic resources that they need, and it's definitely a city asset. I understand all of that. I'm also not saying that the verdict of the override is something that extends indefinitely and permanently. Not at all. My point, though, is that for now, as Councillor Noel just said, the voters haven't given a mandate for making the trade-offs that come with additional capacity, additional field capacity. And what the synthetic turf it represents here essentially is a shortcut attempt to say, well, we're not going to spend more money. We're not going to get the political backing to spend more money or set aside more land area or whatever we need to do to make this happen. But we are going to try to increase the capacity by doing it synthetically. And the folks that want, whether they want synthetic turf or they just want added field capacity in general, they haven't, there was some level of organization that happened and mobilization that happened in the past few years. Then it sort of disappeared. I haven't heard anything from them in quite a while. They didn't show up during the override campaign when that was a major issue on the thing. And again, I'm not extending that indefinitely into the future. I'm just saying, based on the results of that and the fact that they weren't involved in that campaign that included that issue, it apparently wasn't a huge priority. Now, maybe it will be in the future. And in fact, part of my point in saying we might have to say no in the short term on saying, look, we don't have enough capacity, we don't have endless capacity, is to say, if you think that this is an important trade-off, and maybe it is, then you have to make that case. You have to mobilize and organize. You have to talk to us. I am more than willing to hear from folks on that. I'm not trying to pit people against each other, but there are trade-offs here. And if they want this, they need to mobilize and convince other voters to agree with them and go along with them. People who don't have kids in the schools, people who don't have any involvement with the athletics, because that's the challenge of running a city where we have to balance a lot of different things on a limited budget. That's the only point that I'm making here, is that politically, that case has not been made. Thank you.
Mr. Chair. Oh, let's go to President Albright first.
The override was to enhance and enhance our fields and put more money into our fields, but it wasn't. I don't understand what you're saying, Councilor Humphrey. Nobody's suggesting that we're going to start buying houses, knocking them down, and putting up more fields. I don't think that's on anybody's playlist. Maybe you do.
I don't know what you're talking about, and I'd like to move on.
Well, I'm not scolding you. I'm trying to have a debate with you.
It's been a long night of this.
Councilor Humphrey, I don't get that at all.
Appreciate both the passion that everyone brings to this topic, as well as the debate, which there will be time for. This is actually not the item for it. This is just a discussion on the cost-benefit analysis of fields. On the table, we have a motion to hold. I didn't get to really weigh in, but as a former baseball player and captain of the hockey team in Newton South, I would like a future discussion of this to help us understand what the impact of turf versus grass fields will be on the ice time of the hockey players, but we can set that aside for the moment. We have a motion to hold. All those in favor of hold, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Councilor Baker, are you here?
Aye.
I've been here a while. I've just been listening.
Councilor Baker, welcome. Any abstentions? Okay, so that's hold on 6323. Let's move along to the strategic and operational plan. Is that next up on your list there, Commissioner Banks?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
We'll share our screen again. Luis, if you don't mind bringing up that next portion. These should be much shorter to review, and we have discussed this item previously. So if you want to go to the next slide, Luis, we shared this information at the start of the spring season. This was our FY23 plan for investments in our premier playing fields. This is the general plan that was put together for grass turf management, and it was meant to utilize the additional fields that were budgeted for. So this is the operating budget total of just over $300,000, the investment plan. Major changes from what was being projected to our current as we looked to close out the end of the fiscal year. We did have soil testing done at 11 of our fields that showed a need to add a lime treatment program. So that center column where you do not see any investments, we will be adding in our investments with lime. It was a total investment of $12,000. And that was over, I think, 11 or 12 sites. So we will update that information. These are our irrigated fields that we are looking at here. We really can't do this type of work on non-irrigated fields. And we do also have additional field fee revenue and capital funds that have been invested, including free cash, ARPA funds that have been designated for projects. But this was really the plan to expend the operating budget. Next slide, Luis. So just here's some of the work that we have completed over this current fiscal year, and some that we are anticipating coming up in the next year. We have done the light projects as we're discussed tonight. The irrigation, I'm going to talk a little bit more in detail on that on the next slide because it was a significant investment this year. And we did get a field lining machine, which has saved us a ton of time. And you can see that nifty little gadget in the bottom corner here. As coming up for next year, we're looking to do our 2 turf field replacements at South, the track resurfacing at South, adding the field lights to the Newton North High School, Forte Park light replacement, upgrade to the LED lights and full control system there. Pellegrini light repairs, not a replacement yet. And again, irrigation and well repairs as needed because that is such an important component of keeping these fields as premier playing fields. The next slide is taking a look at our irrigation work. And this has been funded from our Fields Revolving Fund. It has been, you've probably seen some of the emails that came in when irrigation systems come down. We often get the photograph of the field. Why is the grass going brown? I hear from many of you if those things happen. It has been really great having these funds available and ready to access to be able to do these repairs right away and to be very responsive to these sites that we are looking to continue to manage in this improved state. If we did not have these funds, we would often be looking for other funding sources, preparing a quote, getting the pricing, and then looking to bring something forward to the city, which sometimes for those funding requests can take us months and months. And the grass turf just can't go through that waiting period. And that was really, just to share and kind of give a little bit of an update on that investment plan. Derek and Rob in our office have put together and been able to utilize all of those additional budget funds, which have been made available over the past 2 years. And I believe we're starting to see some great improvements from that work. Luis, well, do you want to take questions?
Yeah.
If we can stop sharing for just a moment and just anything on the fields maintenance plan.
Appreciate that. So that was just to focus people in item 370-22, the discussion of the field maintenance plan. Thank you, Commissioner Banks. Appreciate the information. Any questions from councilors on that item? Comments? Where's the passion on this one? Commissioner Banks, I want to thank you. I do appreciate the updated field maintenance plan. I know we worked for years sort of as a committee. We passed resolutions, we discussed the budget, and you've worked very hard to increase the ongoing annual maintenance budget and the plan to take care of our fields. I think it was a shared priority amongst both the administration as well as the members of this committee and the city council. And I think we're making really, really good progress on it. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you.
I share that with my team, who is really pushing hard to be out there on the fields doing this work. So they appreciate the extra support. Yes, thank you, Pat. They do a great job.
Thank you all. So we can hold that item. I assume that's 370-22. If anyone wanted to make a motion to hold that item.
Motion to hold.
Councilor Wright has moved hold. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great. Thank you, Commissioner Banks. And I know I introduced them all at the beginning, but why don't we go on to the last one, 453-22.
Great. And Luis, I'll ask you to share the screen. I'm so glad that Luis is really good at sharing his screen because I mess it up every time. So I appreciate you running this this slideshow tonight. So this is a continuation of our discussion on our capital improvement plan. And of course, our department has a very robust section in the city's capital improvement plan. But this request was, the feedback we received was to bring forward more all-encompassing of the project work that the department's involved in. So these could be some of our mid and small size projects as well. Maybe things that don't reach that level of the capital plan. When we showed this to programs and services at your last meeting, basically I think the request was to just try to fill this out a bit more and complete these. So Luis, if you want to switch to, I think this will just give everybody a reminder of what it is we're looking at, our project master list. Again, this will be in the presentation. We'll send this out. We can send a copy of this information. So, you know, we don't need to get into all of the details, but we have had additional state earmarks. ARPA funds have been designated. Many of our friends groups have been making some commitments to some fundraising campaigns. We were at the finance meeting accepting a lot of those funding components that have come in for some of the project work that our department will be managing. There are some things on the list that I would say we weren't able to provide the full amount of clarity because the override did not pass. So for example, with our tennis court maintenance, we had hoped to put that onto a maintenance plan where we would be investing in a certain number of courts per year. You know, this just means that we will continue to manage our courts the way that we have been doing so. We will put together what the needs are, look at our priorities, and request funding as we're able to. The mayor has helped us get through this year by putting some ARPA funds into the tennis courts. I believe it's $100,000 of the ARPA funds to support tennis court maintenance for this coming fiscal year. So we'll be looking to invest those. Things that can change on this list, we might get developer funds, things that get brought forward through the year, you know, something that a friends group is interested in providing. So it's not uncommon for us to have new projects come about and be placed on our list. And we, you know, kind of look at trying to see where we are in managing projects and where we can timeline something new in. This is, you know, I would just pretty much say this is kind of a rough idea of the plan ahead, looking ahead to the future as much as we can. And just like with our capital plan, a lot of things can change in the year, and we will work to keep the project list updated. So really the things that Luis and I have tried to work to fill out here are funding sources and taking a guess on some of our timelines. Once a project gets selected, we typically work with the community. We need to set the project scope, and then we can really dig in on what you know, a proposal, a timeline, and project cost would look like. And we can stop sharing the screen again, and any questions or anything. Again, just wanted to end here with our field marking robot. If you haven't heard, we have a naming contest underway. And so we will have, I'm sure, a huge announcement soon when we select the name for our robot. And we just have a couple of contact pieces here that if people would like to email us or check out updates on our website. The newtonma.gov/field projects has a ton of information on the work that's been being done.
Is that where folks can enter the robot naming contest?
That was, I think you would email us at parks@. So if you have any clever ideas, send those right away. We're looking to announce it soon.
I think the sort of, CIP list is fantastic. I'm wondering if it is possible to sort of, in real time, maintain that list and keep it available, on the website so that folks can just refer to that from time to time or go to it and see where things are at. Is that a huge ask, or is that possible?
I think I'm sort of conceptualizing this as something we update a couple times a year. I'd probably like to look at this in terms of, when we update our CIP and keeping up on that.
Yeah.
I think that's, reasonable to say this. Certainly don't mind sharing it and having it be available.
Okay. Yeah. And then, as projects are completed, they also.
It changes. This is a plan,
Totally.
and they're really just guesstimates at this point.
Totally understand. And that's why I ask about maintaining it and keeping access to it, because I know it does change, and projects get completed, things move on. So it's just nice to, I think it's a fantastic resource, and I think it's a tremendous help to us and nice to have insight into where things are at. So
we can take a look at where to post it now that we've completed the filling out of it to a good point here.
Right. Gotcha. I'm not seeing any hands. Any hands? Okay. This is, excuse me. This is item 453-22. So did someone want to move hold? Councillor Ryan raised her hand so that she could move hold.
No, I have a question. I was just trying to find it.
Spidey senses off.
All right, I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
All right. On the funding for the it's the money funding for athletic fields. To say that's not what we've already discussed that enough. I'm just wondering for the improvement of the playgrounds, what can you give any specifics on what the improvements are? I don't have to make it a big deal, just I'm looking for the ADA and all that.
So the playground improvements, I actually think we have a next item. If we're still doing that tonight.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we were already there.
Where we're requesting some funds, the marathon funds. We're looking to see if those could be dedicated towards playground work. But we do have funds in the current fiscal year that are getting encumbered, and we're looking to complete the new playground installation at Forte with those funds. Over the past year, most of our projects have focused on the accessibility improvements. We completed 4 sites with accessible matting. And then going forward, we're going to be looking to sort of work to have our operating funds matched up with any additional funding requests, such as the marathon request, to move on. We do keep a list of playgrounds. We always update that list in case anything during inspections changes, but those funds would help us with maintaining, repairing, and it's the challenge is the replacement, because those are really high cost, and it's really, we're kind of getting to the point where we need to roll budget funds to the next year, or bring forward a request for funding. So that's our plan. We're going to continue to look for ways to find those funds. I would also say we've had some success with some groups, either PTOs or friends groups, who have also been willing to fundraise and help invest. So sometimes if there's some funding available, that's an option too, if we have a motivated group to work with us. So I hope that answers your question. And
yeah, I was wondering if they were still doing some of the fundraising, because I know Memorial Spalding did it about 5 years ago on their playground. All right, great, thanks. Sorry if I got ahead of myself.
No worry. It sounds to me like you also want to move hold on 453-22. Is that right?
Yeah, move hold. Yep.
Great. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, I believe that's 8-0 to hold. Okay, and on to our last item, back to item 155-23. This was the item to appropriate $140,000 to the Parks Rec and Culture account. We previously discussed this.
Our fearless leader's gone.
Uh-oh.
Vice Chair seize control.
Vice Chair.
I thought it was my computer.
Okay, happy to seize control. Does somebody want to text Josh and tell him he's gone? He might know he's gone, but.
He's back.
Oh.
Back?
Sorry. I don't know when you lost me.
Gosh, I was ready
It was
to,
brilliant.
I was ready to jump in. Put me in, coach.
Appreciate it, Councilor Noel. Did you hear me introduce the new item?
Barely. Do you want to just do it again?
Okay. Yes, it is 155-23. This is the item to appropriate $140,000 to the Parks Rec and Culture account. We had taken this up in mid-May and held it by a vote of 6-0. This deals with marathon funds. We had some questions about the budget, about how much the city spends to accommodate the marathon, how much money comes in. We have some additional information in our packets. Commissioner Banks, did you want to tell us what the money is being used for, or Mr. Yo, was it someone else? I apologize, I don't know.
I'd be happy to take us through the request. So we've requested the funds for two pieces. The primary funding would be for the majority of the funds would go to the playgrounds, and I'll talk about that next. But Luis, if I think you can still share your screen, I just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware that about the marathon banner. So our Arts and Cultural Development Department has been working on this banner, and we've placed it along the marathon route at the top of Heartbreak Hill for the past couple of years. It has been very well received, and it has been featured in some of the news broadcasts of the marathon. People do want to, it's really about celebrating the athletes, the work that they put into this, and really the iconic value of Heartbreak Hill and what it means to make it to the top of that hill with all the training that goes into it. As you can see in some of these photos, these were, kind of social media posts that people put together and tagged our Arts and Cultural Department. I watched the race from this point, this past race for a little while, and people would stop and take their picture with it and sort of celebrate. And Chair Krinsman, you may not think that's great because they probably didn't get as great a time for competing in the race, but it was really kind of neat to see this happen. So that is what the request is for. We have a quote. Basically what we're looking to do here is install permanent poles to affix the banner to, because you can't see it in any of these pictures, but we've been utilizing our forestry trucks to hang the banner high above the race course. And with permanent poles, we'd like to put the banner out ahead of time, allow people to take pictures while they're training, and really kind of celebrate everything that the marathon brings into our community. And we are working with DPW to get updated costs. We do have some funding that is available that we're looking to put toward this, but we want to make sure we can complete the funding for this. So it's not the primary use of the funds, but that's what the marathon banner is, just so everybody has seen it. And then I can talk about the playgrounds a little bit too, or I can take questions for the banner. What would you prefer, Chair?
Well, let's see what councilors wanted to discuss, because we did already discuss a lot of the item earlier, so there may not be outstanding questions on that. Let's see what folks have questions on, if that's okay. Commissioner Banks.
I have a question.
Councilor Baker, you then Councilor Noel. Councilor Baker.
I'm sorry, I want to use whoever's in order.
I'm sorry?
It's you. You had your hand
I
up
can
first.
talk, but I can't see, so I'll have to.
Oh. Yeah, no, I am calling on you, Councilor Baker, and I know that Sally is giving up time with you for you to be here, so please, go ahead.
Thank you, and thanks, Sally. I guess I have some concerns about this particular item, not because I think the banner is a bad idea in the context of the marathon, but Commonwealth Avenue, we worked very hard. The Commissioner Banks, you weren't on in the role that you had. When we redid the Commonwealth Avenue lights a number of years ago, because there were banners that were hanging on the carriageway side and not on the street side, so that when Boston College kept its banners up, they would be next to the college and not in the public green space. And I guess my concern about the installation is that this is an important part. It's really the gateway to the city from the other direction. And I'm concerned about how these poles are going to affect the streetscape, or whether the banner is going to be up for other things. And in general, we've tried to discourage. There was a policy the Public Facilities Committee passed 10 years ago to try and minimize the amount of banners on the scenic roads in the city. So I'd like to have a little more clarity about exactly how this is going to look. The pictures you've shown are the banner, but not of the poles, and what the impact of the poles are going to be and how much this is going to be used.
Commissioner Banks, do you want?
There are no current polls there, so we don't have a picture of the polls, but you know, the idea would be to have probably a double-sided banner that you could see from either side. And it would be something for this particular installation for the marathon. You know, I don't think it would be up for any more than 1 month, just a few weeks leading up to the race and through it. It could potentially be utilized for other things if there was something else that the city wanted to put there. It certainly could be considered for that. We are working with the traffic division with DPW to identify the type of pole, make sure that they are, you know, fit the area and are sturdy enough to be able to use the application. And it is something that our Arts and Culture Development Department would be more than willing to take on, you know, the putting it up, how long it stays up, just reviewing that each year for us. And if there was any other applications the city was interested in, you know, we'd be happy to be involved in reviewing.
So how much is part of this appropriation of the polls? Because I'd like to see this carved out and dealt with separately, because I'm not sure what the impact is going to be, how it's going to be. You know, this is to say, this is not an advertising space, even for the city. It's really designed to be one of the great green sections of Newton, and all the way from the Boston line all the way out. And we've tried to make sure that it stays as a greenway. And I'm just concerned that even while I can understand the use during the race, for this purpose to turn into something much more elaborate seems to me not a good idea unless I know more about it. It's at least my own view. So I'd like to see this particular piece of the item held and maybe create a parens too, Mr. Chairman, so that we can have a better discussion of what's specifically the installation and long-term use of this facility is going to be.
And appreciate that, Councilor Baker. Am I correct, Commissioner Banks, that it is $50,000 is the amount of this request that is for the polls for the time?
That is the estimate. We're still working with DPW to identify, you know, exactly what that amount would be. They're just taking a look at the type of pole, the style of pole, and what that would cost with the installation. And so, you know, I would say that of the total requested amount, this would be, you know, a smaller portion of the request than the playgrounds amount. And, you know, we would work to make sure that as much as we can put to the playgrounds, we would do that. I will just mention, just so everyone is aware, we do oversee the banner program that is along the Greenway and along other areas of the city. We do review those banners. They do not have any advertising on them, but they are a public art initiative. And so this is something that our Arts and Culture Department is, you know, very involved in taking a look at what's appropriate to have in a public space. And it's certainly not anything that we would be recommending for advertising.
So Councilor
Well, I think
Baker,
that-
I hear your request, and I have 3 other hands up. Let me go through those and then we'll come back to your motion to separate off $50,000 in a parens.
That's fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, could I just add on to the commissioner's statement?
Go ahead, Mr. Yo.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. This is really about public art and community celebration. And this is the iconic location at the top of Heartbreak Hill. And instead of using trucks to do this, there would be one pole over on the other side of the road, and one pole that would be on the thin side, not like a giant street light pole or anything like that, that would be in the median. So we think this is a valuable, very valuable commodity or location for the city to create something. And it is $50,000. We would ask that you not separate it out. We think these are both important aspects of the use of the BAA money in keeping with tradition and focusing on the marathon itself and Newton's important role in the marathon. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let me come back to Councilors Noel, then Ryan and President Albright. So Councilor Noel.
Thank you. So I appreciate the presentation, and I know when this was on the agenda before, I spoke at length about how much I appreciate from the BAA to support the marathon, and is that money actually going to support the marathon? So I'm not, we're provided some backup, which I have a few questions on, but especially in light of what happened this year at the marathon and having, just met earlier tonight with public safety and transportation about sort of processing what happened. It is my will that this money that we receive from the marathon be used to support the marathon. And so I just have a question about the backup material we received, and I think I can direct that to Mr. Yo. So the backup specifically says, initially, Mr. Yo, you had said in the meeting last time that the marathon money we received does not cover our costs. And then,
well, on further review, when we really got down to the details, it does. So
I think
that's good news.
My question is, I guess I'm a little bit, maybe skeptical is the word, about the numbers that were submitted, because you specifically stated in them overtime costs, which I'm assuming there are many costs about the marathon that aren't overtime. They're just straight pay. And I know when we met earlier tonight at 7 o'clock with public safety and transportation, the superintendent said you start meeting about the marathon 6 months before the marathon. So I'm assuming those costs are not day of costs. I'm sure there's costs before and after the marathon that should be included in the analysis.
Well, that's a whole different look, whole different type of, there's hundreds of things that you could then try to charge for straight time. So this is specifically regarding the marathon. So
what do you mean by regarding the marathon? The marathon day?
Okay. Yeah, regarding the marathon day. And so $104,000 is the overtime. People aren't on straight time that day, they're on overtime. So that is the total. And so we had the additional payment for the 2 marathons. So we have this additional money, and this is what we thought made the most sense to spend.
But we got the additional payment because we hosted 2 marathons, right?
Correct.
So there'd be 2, in theory, the day of cost would be 104 times 2, but there's definitely preparation time that goes into a marathon and cleanup that goes after a marathon, right?
Well, the cleanup is all part of the overtime. It's all cleaned up that night. So that's all included. The preparation time, if, when there are a couple meetings leading up to the marathon on straight time, that is not included in here.
Right. I mean, the chief
Yeah.
said, or the superintendent said tonight, you guys start meeting 6 months before the marathon.
There's like some monthly meetings leading up to it with a handful of staff. So yeah, there's some additional straight time, but
sure.
In the end, there was 2 marathons. There was some extra money that's in this account.
Right, but you're
Those
spending the
overtime
whole
costs were all
amount.
paid for years ago. So
Yeah, I mean, you're advocating the whole 140,000 to this new
correct.
cost. So that's not
Yep.
additional money. I also, when I live by the marathon, so I definitely see the you know, the, what do you call them? The wooden horses, the barriers get picked up the next day and stuff. So I mean, I can appreciate that it's hard to quantify, but it seems like we're probably close, if not over, to the $140,000. And I think from our meeting tonight, it's clear that there could be additional costs allocated from this BAA funding around police training, around community.
Yeah, the police department has a substantial regarding response on major events, then they would do it using their training budget.
Sure, but I guess what I'm wondering is if it's a marathon related cost, why don't we allocate it to the marathon money? Instead
Well,
of
at this
taking out
point,
of
we
the
don't.
general operating, which, I mean, we know, having just gone through a budget season, there's lots of competition for that general operating money. So why don't we spend the money we get from the BAA for the marathon to marathon related costs?
That's what we're going to do this year. This is money left over from previous years. So the money that's coming in, the money that's coming in now that will be coming in this year for a marathon will be spent on, you know, covering all of our costs.
It doesn't
This
make
is-
sense that you have $140,000 extra if on average your overtime costs are $101,000 a year per marathon. So if there's 2 marathons, it's $202,000.
Right, those were all covered a couple of years ago. So this is money still left over in an account. We don't need to cover overtime from 2 years ago. That's already been paid for through the financial system. This is money that's left over in an account that otherwise is just sitting there.
Okay.
Historically,
I don't wanna belabor-
money was spent, the BAA money was spent on playground maintenance. That is something that was historically done here in Newton.
I understand, I don't mean to be daft about this. I understand it was historically done. As a sitting counselor with oversight on the budget, it seems to me that the money that we get allocated from the BAA should go towards marathon costs and not be reallocated.
And that's what happens.
From the presentation
Except this one did not. This one did not from a couple
seem
years
like
ago.
it consistently has been happening if we've been spending BAA money on playgrounds. I'll leave it there. This is not an item I can support. Not that I don't care about playgrounds or banners, but I think we have some work to do to support the marathon. And I think when we go through the budgeting process, we've been arguing about the police budget and other budgets. And I think we need, for lack of a better word, truth in budgeting. That if we're getting money from the BAA, we should be spending it on the real true costs of the marathon and not depleting our operating funds. And if we want to put money into banners and playgrounds, it should come from the operating costs and it should be a priority from the mayor's office.
Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just want to ask, staying on the money, so the actual cost of the 2 poles and the banners is $50,000? Is that?
That's what's built into the memo and what we as a committee are operating on at the moment.
All right, then the
Well, I
rest
think the
is,
banner is paid for. I think it's just the cost of the poles.
all right, and DPW is doing the installation?
Yeah.
All right, I mean, because, you know, we contract stuff out, they just wanted to. And as far as the banner itself being up, I mean, we're saying a month, but are we gonna end up, sorry, I'm falling out of the screen here. Are we gonna be using it for other banners throughout the year? Or is it just for the Heartbreak Hill banner?
I can let Commissioner Banks answer that, but I think what she said was they intend to put the Heartbreak Hill banner up for about a month preceding the marathon, but poles would be there so that it would be an option to have other banners or different events throughout the year. Is that right, Commissioner Banks?
That's correct. We don't currently have any other plans to use it, but because the polls would be there, our department would be, very open to reviewing it, similar to what we have done for the flag banners for public art. It could be utilized for like a holiday celebration. Those would be options for us to review if we wanted to do that. But there's no other plans right now.
All right, because I want to, lean close on what Council Baker was saying. I don't want to separate this into a friends too, but what I understand what he's saying about the greenway and the about the green space there and the carriageway and all that, but the Boston Marathon and the city of Newton have had this connection for over 100 years. We have the Johnny Kelly statue on the green space between Comm Ave and the carriageway and right across from City Hall. So that's something that's already there related to the marathon. So I support the banner, but I don't support it for any other use except for, and I can understand it being up for a month and not just on that day, because a lot of people have the big practice. I mean, even though it goes on all year, it really heats up about a month before the actual race and people want to take pictures. But the city itself is such an integral part of the marathon and the history of the marathon. But my thing, I just want to make sure that what the actual cost of the poles and the banner were. And I mean, I can support that on the basis that it's only going to be used for that.
And Councillor Ryan, just to clarify, it wouldn't be for any outside groups. If the city wanted to use it for something, that would be the only thing.
Yeah, I'm just not sure that I would even want it to be used for any other use except for that 1 month for the Boston Marathon, for the Heartbreak Hill, because the Heartbreak Hill itself is historic and worldwide known. So I understand the reasoning for it and I support it, but on that limited basis. So thanks.
Commissioner, I think it would be fair to say that we would be prepared to have dialogue with others and counselors before we considered using it for things other than the marathon. I mean, that's really the purpose of this. So, if something came up where the city was interested in for some other reason, I think, we would engage in some kind of dialogue with the council about it. Thank you.
President Albright.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you, Mr.
I haven't forgotten about you, Councilor Baker, don't worry.
So before I talk about the marathon and the polls and so forth, I just wanted to say that a number of us had been interested in the policy with regard to, the banners. And we're very interested in how that policy was going to evolve. And I know the law department had worked on it after the Boston case. And that's the kind of thing that I think would have been, I may have missed it and maybe everybody else knows what the policy is. But I wish that that kind of a policy could be distributed to the council so that we know what the policy is as well. And as I said, I may have missed it. You may have done it. The mayor's office may have done it. I don't know. But I've been wondering what the heck happened, because all of us, there were no banners, and now there are banners on Commonwealth Avenue. I'm happy there are banners. They're great. I love them. I just would have loved to have known what the outcome of the policy was.
Councillor Albright, I do not think you missed that. Law and DPW were working on the policy for the banners, and my understanding is that that's still under review. The banners that are out currently are just a public art initiative that the city took on. So Those were donated to the city, and we have installed those basically as one of our public art initiatives. So similar to the flutter butterflies that are out in the parks, or the painted pianos. The ones that are up currently are owned by the city and are part of our public art installation. But the banner policy is still under review as far as I know.
Well, if there's a public art policy about banners, I'd love to know about that as well. So whatever it is, I'd love to know about it. But with respect to the poles, I don't know what they're going to look like with poles just standing there all year long and used 1 month out of the year for the Heartbreak Hill part of the marathon. I love the banner. I think it's a great idea. I love the way it looks. I hate the poles. And I can't help myself. I grew up in that part of Newton, and I watched the marathon from right there every year for many, many years. And I think having those poles there for no purpose for 12 months, 11 months out of the year make no sense to me. If you could put the poles up, you know, the month before the marathon and take the poles down after the marathon, I'd be happy. But having those poles, and I don't know how tall they're going to be. What are they? What will they be? 15 feet, 20 feet? I don't know. What will they be?
Yeah, the banner will need to be about 15 feet high. So they will be shorter than like a telephone pole. And DPW is researching some, thinner style poles that would fit into the area.
Many of us are not a fan of telephone poles, and to add poles that are just going to sit there with nothing on them for 11 months of the year, I'm not a fan, and I probably won't. That's why I like Councilor Baker's idea of separating the two items, because I really don't want to vote for the polls. That's it.
Thank you, President Albright. Okay, Councilor Baker, I'm back to you. Seems like you have some options here. I think you should make a motion. I think we should get a sense of where the committee stands on it. I totally up to the committee, obviously. I think you could reduce the allocation by 50,000. You could separate it out if there are just lingering questions, but it sounds like, I don't know.
Well,
It's up to you.
I'm going to recommend we reduce the allocation by 50,000, so that this issue, I agree, this is an installation that is going on that I think is not a good idea for year-round installation. And Mr. Yo may not remember because he's not been part of the administration, but we went through a policy 10 years ago in public facilities to produce a whole policy about limiting the use of banners and various activities on the scenic ways in the city for precisely the concerns that have been raised. So I'd like to get a sense from the committee. I think the committee would be willing to support the balance of the funds. Certainly we'd like to see them, if they're possible to use for this purpose of park maintenance, that's great. But I'd like to carve this out and hold on that part and pass the other.
Well, so let me just get the motion straight, Councilor Baker. The item is for $140,000 for the Heartbreak Hill banner and playground improvements. It sounds like you want to either reduce it to $90,000 just for playground improvements, or separate it into two different items and vote on them.
Well, because I want to give the administration a chance to have a chance to explain this better, I'd be perfectly happy to hold it, a piece of it to 50,000, but pass the other. So if that's possible to do, I think that's what we ought to do.
Understood. Okay, so let me at least take that as a motion right now. And the motion is to separate it into the existing item and a parens one. The parens one would be the $50,000 for the Heartbreak Hill banner. The underlying item will remain at $90,000 and include the playground improvements. And let's take discussion on that. Councilor Humphrey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think Councilor Baker's proposed a reasonable course of action that preserves our ability to continue talking about this. And I think part of the concern last time had been waiting for the discussion in PS&T to happen, which only happened tonight. So some of us were here and didn't even get to see that yet. But Not that it's necessarily going to make much of an impact on the decision, but I think that was part of that discussion. I realized there's been, a lot on our agenda in general. I had one clarifying question though, again, not to rehash the earlier point about the budgeting, but I think it's a clarification for both parts of this. So you said historically the playgrounds had often gotten money from the BAA for this, but that was based on extra money that was left over above and beyond the marathon associated costs, or what?
No, that's a good question. No, the answer is for many years until I think it's about 8 years ago, because I was a PTO president for a long time. We were involved in some of these builds where we would get some money from the city to supplement PTO funds for playground work. And the BAA money was used for that. It was a much lower amount at the time. So I think they only gave $12,500 for each playground project that happened. And they weren't trying to cover, the city wasn't trying to cover or pay for their expenses related to the marathon using those funds. So
okay, so
about 8 years ago, they started to just keep the money. And so those funds were used to largely, cover our costs. And which, as you can see, they're doing a pretty good job now of covering the costs, at least the overtime. I get the straight time is a different issue.
And we have or haven't been using it recently for playgrounds.
We have not.
Okay, so we had taken a few years off, but then previously we had used to use it for playgrounds.
Yep. Historically, they were used for quite a few years for playgrounds.
Okay.
And then it was stopped. And then in this case, there was 2 payments in a year. And so some money was $140,000 was left in this account. And so that's what we're trying to spend. It was really money from 2 years ago, really.
And it wasn't just, well, I could be wrong, but this is me trying to remember from the last meeting we discussed this at. It wasn't just that there was 2 and that they gave us 2 payments. Did they also give us additional money beyond that?
I don't think so. I think they made 2 payments to us for $140,000. We kept $140,000. And then there was $140,000 left in the account that somehow, for some reason, wasn't used to cover costs. So it was just sitting there, and this made the most sense to all of us as to how to spend this money.
Okay. Well, I appreciate the clarification, because I think that does sort of strengthen the point that Councilor Noel was making. And I guess it's true. Well, I guess it's true that in the past we hadn't even received enough money to even theoretically cover those costs from the BAA in the past, because it was the much smaller figure that you gave from, 10 or however many years ago. Which, as I said last time, I mean, that's bewildering to me that we would be spending this kind of public money on somebody else's thing going through our city, like they should be paying for it. So
I think many people in Newton see that very differently. The marathon to this city is it is an integral part of this city. We see it as a positive thing, so we don't see it as a negative thing. But that being said, now we're getting $140,000, and we have $104,000 in overtime costs. So, going forward, we're getting a decent amount for it. So, but this was just some money left over from 2 years ago that we wanted to repurpose for good things.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's only left over in the sense that you're not using it to cover the costs associated with running one of those.
Well, we don't need
marathons.
to, because those were covered, those were dealt with in a budget 2 years ago. So
Right, but they were dealt with in a budget
gone.
as opposed to being dealt with from BAA money, which is the point that Councilor Noel was making, and the point that I essentially agree with, which is that although I would love to see more money go to playgrounds and so forth, I just don't understand, you know, and I understand you disagree with this and the administration disagrees with this, but I don't understand paying with our own money to pay a bunch of overtime to manage somebody else's race. That's a private group. And I'll leave it at that.
All right, thank you, Councillor Humphrey. Councillor Noel.
Thank you. I just want to explain my vote. So I think I made it clear. I think the marathon dollars should be allocated towards marathon expenses. So I'm not going to vote for this amendment. I'm not going to vote for any of this tonight because I want this money to be allocated towards marathon costs. And it doesn't mean I don't love the marathon or think that the marathon should run through Newton. I just think if the BAA is giving us $140,000 to run the marathon, we should be using that money to run the marathon.
Okay, thank you. We now, as a committee, have either 2 or 3 votes before us. First vote we're going to take is whether to split the item.
Josh?
Councilor Ryan.
Yeah, I have my hand up. I got a couple of questions. So I'm wondering what the discussion is on 2 poles on the banner with the city. What is there really there to discuss? As Council Baker said, and maybe you were about to explain how the votes work, but so we can vote for vote yes on one thing and no on the other, or vote for.
Yeah, let me say what I was going to say, and then I'll come right back to you before we do any votes.
All right.
Okay, does that make sense? Okay.
Chair Krinsman, can I say a little bit about the playgrounds before that vote?
All right, let me explain what we're going to do, and then we can hear arguments in favor or against, okay? So what we as a committee are going to do now, Councilor Baker has made a motion to split the item into 2, with the underlying item being $90,000 for playground improvements, and the parens 1 or second item being $50,000 for poles for the Heartbreak Hill sign. After we as a committee decide whether or not to split the item, we will then vote in support or in opposition to either the one item that has not been split, or in support or opposition to each of the 2 items after it has been split. Okay, so first thing we're going to decide is whether to split it, and then we'll either have 1 thing to deal with or 2 things to deal with, and on each of those, we will take an up or down vote. Does that make sense? Okay. Councilor Ryan, first, let me hear what you wanted to say. I guess it was about the sign and the poles, and then Commissioner Banks, I'll come to you to talk more about the playgrounds as well.
Well, I just don't see any. I just don't see any, whether we split it or not. What the discussion would be on 2 poles and a banner.
Well, let me just respond to that.
I just don't see any reason to hold this or let it go any further than tonight. So that's what I have to say, and you explain the vote. So thank you.
Nope, and I totally understand. My suspicion from those who are opposed to the polls in the banner would be that on that parens 1 on that item, that they would make a motion to hold that tonight, whether it's, you know, because they're looking for some information, or, you know, I think Councilor Baker's words were, you know, give the administration an opportunity to come forward with more information or something like that. Again,
Yeah.
You know, not speaking to the merits of it. That's, I think, what the intention would be.
Yeah, and what I'm saying is, what more do we have to know about that?
Totally understand. You're ready to vote on it tonight.
We're debating, I'm debating. I don't get it. So, all right. And it's
Right.
late, and we're tired, and some people
I realize that
it's tired and we're late. Councilor Baker, welcome back. Let me first go to Commissioner Banks. She wanted to say something about the playgrounds, and then I will come back to President Albright and Councilor Baker. So Commissioner Banks.
Okay, so first of all, thank you for allowing the funds for the playgrounds to move forward in some sort of a vote, I think, tonight. So we do need funding for the playgrounds. This was really this request for funding. The intent was to put the majority of the funds for the playgrounds. We just had a bit of a conversation about what we're doing with this year's operating budget funds, and how we'll be trying to utilize funds, working with PTOs, other groups. I did want to just let everybody know that we have had a project come up at the Williams School. So there is a special needs program that the school moved into that school. That playground is accessible. It does have ADA compliance, but there are several things that are being looked at by the school department and their PTO. Those include some accessible pathways, expanding those to connect some different areas to the benches for seating, Gaga pit, and also to provide an accessible swing to be close by to the other swings that are in that play area. So that's just one project that has come up that wasn't, as we said with the project list, part of the plan, but is something that we really do want to jump in and assist with. And, in addition to that, sort of the ongoing maintenance, repairs, the Forte project, and other projects that we can look at from our list. So any playground money is very helpful and very welcome. So thank you for reviewing it.
Thank you. President Albright.
So I just want to be clear that if the vote, it's the polls I'm against, not the banner. I love the banner. So I don't know, Commissioner, is there any other way to put that banner? You did it with trucks this year. Is that what you did?
So basically our forestry team is working an overtime shift with 2 of their trucks. I really can't promise that we could continue that every year. We have found a way. We need to be able to schedule both of the trucks to be able to be in place to attach it to either side of the road. And that truck could be needed for other, it could get called out for tree work, and that would have to take the priority. But, we love
Commissioner Banks, can I just be clear? The banner, that's in the pictures. We have the banner that's purchased. None of this money is going for the banner.
We own the banner. No, there's no money needed for the banner.
Yeah.
This is just about installing poles that could be used to attach the banner across the street.
The funding request is purely for the support system to hold up the banner.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and we've also looked at using existing poles, and DPW has researched that pretty extensively and is not feasible. So we did look at that. It's as the second choice, or a first choice actually.
And I will certainly bring back the feedback about removable poles. I don't know if there's any options like that, but that's something we could explore.
Okay, well, in keeping with Councilor Baker's motion, that would give you a chance to see if there is a way for that. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, President Albright. Councilor Greenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I support some of the money going to the playgrounds. I was wondering if I understand Councilor Baker's reservations about having the poles standing up there all year long with nothing on them. I was wondering if you guys thought about perhaps using the poles as for American flag poles for the other 11 months.
Yeah, so they could have the banner brackets. That is a good idea. I will say there are some other poles that are in this area. There's several different poles that are already there. So, when we did our site visit, we sort of felt like they could blend in and be well placed. But we can take a look to see if the pole could also have the brackets for the small banners, which are the ones that you see out in the community right now that are the public art installation.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I think it's time to vote. Oh, Councilor Baker, you want to speak?
Yeah, I think all of this points to the fact that we don't know exactly how these are going to be used and what they're going to look like and their long-term impact. And we have enough pole pollution in the city, as I think the president has pointed out. Not that these can't be designed well, and that's an opportunity, but I just think that this is an important gateway to the city. We shouldn't be making this kind of decision on this limited basis of information. And no disrespect to Mr. Yo, the idea of having conversations at some point, those conversations we need to have before we make these decisions rather than after. So I hope that the council or the members of the committee will vote to separate it. And then I'm going to move hold on the 50,000 and urge the committee to vote the 90.
Okay, so first vote we're going to take is whether to split up. Again, underlying will remain as the playground money. The parens one would be the 50,000 for the Heartbreak Hill poles. So I think we can do this by voice vote. Committee, okay, splitting it into two pieces here. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed?
No.
Councilor Ryan, you're opposed. Any other opposition? All right, any abstentions? Okay, so that's a 7-1. We now have two items before us. The first item is the playgrounds. Do I have a motion to approve the 90,000 for the playground?
Yes.
Councilor Baker's moved approval. Seeing no other discussion, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Councilor Noel is opposed. Any other opposition? All right, any abstentions? Okay, so that's 7-1 to support the playground money. Councilor Baker has moved hold on parens one, which is the Heartbreak Hill poles, the 50,000 for the Heartbreak Hill poles. Any discussion on the motion to hold? Okay, all those in favor of holding parens one, $50,000 for the Heartbreak Hill poles, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Thank you, Councilor Ryan. Any abstentions?
Abstention.
Okay, so that is 6-1 to 1 to hold on parens one. Right? Everyone in agreement with what we just did? Okay. I think that
Thank you
concludes
very
our
much.
business for the night. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it. Sorry it was a long night. Oh, sorry, very quickly, committee members. We are looking at July 12th and Jacqueline set me straight, August 16th for our two meetings over the summer.
Here, let me pull that up real quick.
I may have trouble on this on the 12th, but the 16th is fine.
Yeah, I can't be the 12th either.
Neither can I. Oh, no, I can't do the 16th.
I think well, I'll tell you what, we'll send out the final dates. I think that's what Jacqueline pulled the committee, and I think those were where we at least had the majority, or sorry, the most representation available.
Wait a minute. What did you say, the 16th?
I think I said July 12th. and
Good night,
August
everyone
16th.
else. Bye.
Good night, everyone else. Yeah, sorry, thank you. We're done with committee business. We're looking at one meeting in July and one in August, and I think it's July 12th and August 16th.
Guess that's not what you had said before, but
Works for me.
Not? Am I
know.
going crazy? Jacqueline, do I have this right? July 12th, August 16th.
That is correct.
Okay.
We already let you know on this, right?
Yes, I
Yes.
think those were the dates that we had the most. It wasn't, I think one of them we may have had 8 members. I think in July we couldn't find a date with 8 available.
Yeah, all right.
Okay,
Yeah,
and just to
the
give a
12th
quick
is fine.
preview, we'll certainly have a number of things to do, but I anticipate taking up that plastic ordinance again in July. I think we have at least some agreement on some provisions to move forward with. And I anticipate doing the public comments on the tree ordinance in August.
can you also call me later, not tonight, but about the crisis pregnancy centers one?
I'm calling you tonight. We'll talk about it.
Okay.
No, I'm just kidding. Sure, I'll call you. Okay. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate the work tonight. Sorry I kept you up so late. Have a good night.
Good night.
Bye.
Thank you.